The story opens on an old man coughing, his words a ragged whisper. I am an earthling from a civilized society. Just then, a little girl enters his house carrying a bowl of food. Seeing his condition, she asks, Mr. Seo, are you okay? My mother sent this for you. The old man, Seo, thanks her. As the girl places the food on the ground, she replies, It's no problem. Please get well soon and make some more soap. With those words, she leaves, disappearing into a swirling snowstorm. Seo is an earthling, an inhabitant of a civilized world. It has been 50 years since he fell into this cursed one. He, Director Kim, and other employees were on their way to a company workshop when a landslide swept them away. When they regained consciousness, they found themselves in a strange world filled with house-sized, three-tailed foxes, massive twin-headed snakes, and warriors who flew through the sky on swords. It was a world straight out of the martial arts novels he used to read. Most of his colleagues, it turned out, thrived. Within 3 days, their destinies unfolded. Awed by their mythical talents, sage-like beings descended from the heavens and spirited them away. Only Seo and Director Kim were left behind. They, too, hoped for something special to happen, but neither of them possessed any remarkable abilities. Knowing little about this world, they resorted to manual labor. For 6 months, they worked menial jobs in a marketplace just to eat. One day, Director Kim declared he could no longer live like this. He spent all his money on a third-rate martial arts manual from a street vendor. Though everyone laughed, he mastered it in 3 months and became a martial artist. He rose through the ranks, learning increasingly advanced techniques until, as a powerful warrior, he left for the Jianghu, leaving Seo behind. Seo kept hoping for his own miracle, but it never came. 50 years later, he is just an old man, dying from a common cold, coughing up blood and clinging to the memory of Earth. He had tried his best to survive. He learned the language, worked as a laborer, bought a small plot of land, and built a house. He even found modest success making and selling soap, a novelty in this medieval-style world. But that ended when thieves stole his formula, replicated it, and forced him out of the market. Now he simply waits for death. Rejected by this world, a frustrated Seo cries out, What do you want from me? I tried my hardest, so what more must I do? He weeps, wondering why he was never chosen, why he was destined to lose everything. His energy fades and his eyelids grow heavy. As his consciousness slips away, he thinks that with just a little more power, he might have had a chance. Lying on his bed, sick and alone, Seo's life ends. And then, in a flash of brilliant light, he opens his eyes again. He looks down at his hands. They are not the wrinkled, gnarled hands of an old man, but are young and full of life. He is wearing the clothes from his old world, a blue shirt and sweatpants. He looks around and sees them all, Director Kim, Chief O, Section Chief John, and the others. It was in this moment of shock that Seo realized he hadn't been powerless after all. He had gained the ability of regression. This was his first one. Director Kim, his hair half-shaved, looks around in confusion. What's happening? We were just on our way to a workshop. He didn't know where they were, but Seo did. This was day 1. Seo vaguely recalled how they got here. An SUV, a landslide, a sudden flash. The 50-year-old memory was hazy. As he tried to piece it together, a voice called from behind. Hey, Deputy Manager Seo. But Seo was lost in thought. A single question dominating his mind. Now that I've regressed, how should I live? In regression novels, Seo thought, people thrive using their future knowledge. But all I know is how to make soap. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his shoulder. Manager Seo Yun-hyun, a voice shouted. The shout snapped Seo out of his daydream. He turned to see Section Chief Jian. Sorry, Seo started. I was just a bit startled. Swish. The sharp slap echoed, stinging Seo's face. Everyone stared in shock. Deputy Manager Seo! John screamed. You bastard! You dozed off at the wheel on a mountain road. You nearly got us all killed. Seo stood there dazed. The title Deputy Manager felt alien. He hadn't heard it in 50 years and didn't even realize John was talking to him. John's face was twisted with fury. Do you want to lose your job the moment we get back? The threat brought it all rushing back. Seo now remembered this man. Section Chief John Myung-hoon, a real son of a bitch. He was the nephew of the company's executive director and had snagged his position through pure nepotism. As Jian lunged at him again, Chief O stepped between them. That's enough, John, Chief O said. It was a landslide. There was nothing he could have done. Aren't you angry, Chief? John retorted. This psycho was asleep at the wheel. That's why we're in this mess. Seo's memory sharpened. He had dozed off. But that was because John, who was originally supposed to drive, had dumped a week's worth of his own overdue work on Seo the night before, forcing him to stay up all night. "This stupid bastard!" John shrieked, pointing at Seo. "We're stranded because of him." The memories of the next 50 years flooded Seo's mind. He remembered how, back then, he had been so stunned that he simply apologized. He'd accepted the blame and spent the next half-century doing the same, apologizing to bandits who robbed him, to martial artists who mocked him, and to officials who taxed him into poverty. But living through that hell had taught him one thing: you only bow to those you can't handle. Seo stood up straight. "Section Chief John," he said, his voice even, "I know you're upset, but now is not the time for pointing fingers." "You damn son of a bitch!" Jian roared and swung a punch at his face. "Are you looking for a fight?" That punch sealed it. There was no need to kneel before a man like this. Seo spun and drove his fist into John's face, sending him stumbling backward. The others gasped, their eyes wide with disbelief. Seo didn't stop. He pounced, raining down blows. His past life had been a lesson in pain. He'd been beaten by martial artists, bandits, and corrupt officials. Now, pinning John to the ground, he realized that brutal world had given him a gift his colleagues lacked: a capacity for violence. He knew that a blow to the eyes amplifies fear. He knew that a beaten man instinctively utters 2 words. "I'm sorry," John choked out, just as Seo knew he would. Seo might not have mythical talents or world-shaking martial arts, but he finally had the power to change his fate. Director Kim, Chief O, and the others stared at him, their faces pale with fear. Director Kim found his voice first, though it trembled. "Deputy Manager Seo, no matter the reason, how could you beat a colleague so brutally?" "You're right, Director Kim," Seo replied calmly, not bothering to argue. "I lost my temper. I apologize for frightening everyone." Knowing he would never see them again, he bowed deeply to the group. "I was the one driving. I'm sorry I couldn't do more." Director Kim softened slightly. "Section Chief Jian was too harsh," he admitted. "You couldn't have prevented a landslide. He overreacted." Director Kim insisted that Seo apologize to Jian. Seo complied. He knew Director Kim was destined to become one of this world's strongest martial artists, and supporting him now could yield future benefits. Getting on his good side was the smart play. Seo turned to Jian and offered a hand. "My reaction was uncalled for," he said, his voice flat. "I apologize." John, his face swollen and purple, looked ready to retaliate, but froze when he met Seo's eyes. They were completely empty of fear. Once things settled down, Director Kim gestured toward the woods. "We should try to find a village." "That's the logical thing to do," Seo agreed, though he knew the truth. This was the Ascension Path, a forest in the land of Murim, where the only rule was that the strong devour the weak. Immortals and warriors fought for power and honor here. There were no villages for miles. "The sun is setting," Seo said instead. "We should find a safe place to build a shelter for the night." Director Kim nodded. "But what about the car? We have a lot of supplies in there for the workshop." The car was gone forever, but Seo knew they wouldn't believe him if he said so. Wasting his breath was pointless. "Let's split up," he suggested. "One team can look for the car, the other for shelter. We'll meet back here before dark." A few hours later, Seo had a fire blazing inside a cave he'd found. As the group ate the root vegetables he had gathered, a black-haired girl voiced everyone's confusion. "I don't get it. We were in a car during a landslide. How did we end up here but the car didn't?" "This tastes like chestnuts," another girl commented. "Is it crunchy?" Seo asked, smiling faintly. "There's plenty more, so eat as much as you'd like." Director Kim chuckled. "This is a serious situation, but thanks to Manager Seo, it almost feels like fun. I always knew you were dependable." Seo noticed John sulking in a corner, refusing to eat. Director Kim raised his voice slightly, ensuring John could hear. "Manager Seo, if I recall, you were so tired because you worked late last night, right?" "He's right," a brown-haired girl chimed in. "Their manager is incredibly diligent, and it feels like we're camping, thanks to the cave he found," added a red-haired girl. Seo knew they were right. In his past life, it took them hours of wandering aimlessly to find this cave. He just shrugged. "I was lucky." They all laughed and told him to just accept the compliment. Seo allowed himself a small smile, soaking in the moment. It would be the last time any of them laughed together. The next morning, Seo was on his knees, trembling as he offered greetings to the Lord of the Forest. It was a colossal, 7-tailed fox with glowing red eyes. The fox smiled, a chilling sight. "Human," it rumbled, its voice ancient. "You have a unique scent. In my 1,000 years, I have never encountered one like it. The commotion woke the black-haired girl. What's going on? She asked as she stepped out of the cave. Her eyes fell on the fox, and a terrified scream ripped from her throat. Her shriek woke the others. One by one, they emerged from the cave, their own screams joining hers as they saw the monstrous creature. Show some manners, SEO yelled at them over his shoulder. Get on your knees before the Lord of the Forest. The fox's smile widened. Every time I meet your kind, I am reminded how foolish and rude you are. Normally, I would tear you limb from limb. However, it purred, looking at Seo. Since one of you knows his place, I shall be merciful. Its red eyes swept over the terrified group. That said, you must pay a toll for trespassing in my territory. Offer me an arm, and I will permit you to live. The demand hung in the air, turning their fear to ice. Seo's own heart hammered against his ribs. He remembered this moment vividly from his past life. He remembered the screaming, the panic, and how the enraged fox had slaughtered them all. Seo felt a flicker of relief. At least this time, the fox appreciated his manners instead of immediately tearing them all to shreds. Licking its chops, the fox asked which of them would offer an arm. It's just one arm, Seo calculated. A small price to pay. Besides, he knew that the cultivators who would arrive in 2 days could easily heal a lost limb. He had even prepared a pain-dulling herb in advance. Steeling himself, Seo pushed up his sleeve and extended his trembling arm toward the beast. I will offer my arm, he announced. The others stared, shocked that he would sacrifice himself for them. You know your place, human, the fox rumbled, its maw opening wide. In return, I will make this quick. It lunged. A scream of pure agony tore from Seo's throat as the fox's jaws clamped down, severing his arm completely. His colleagues looked away, unable to watch the gruesome sight. Blinding pain consumed him. With tears streaming down his face, Seo fumbled for the herb with his remaining hand and shoved it into his mouth. After swallowing the arm whole, the fox seemed disappointed. I thought you might taste different, given your scent, it commented, but you are the same as any other human. Worse even, with all the impurities in your blood. As the fox spoke, the herb began its work, dulling the excruciating pain and allowing Seo to think again. He bowed his head. I apologize that my offering was not to your liking. The fox was uninterested. You may remain in my territory for 7 days, it declared, as it turned to leave. My divinity will keep you from dying here. With a single powerful leap, it launched into the sky and vanished. The moment it was gone, the others rushed to Seo's side. Everyone inside, he grunted, staggering to his feet. I'll explain everything. Inside the cave, Seo told them what the fox had revealed to him earlier that morning. We are in a land called Murim. The name sent a shockwave through the group. Murim? Director Kim repeated in disbelief. Like in the stories? It doesn't matter, Seo said, his voice strained. What matters is that we are safe for 1 week because I paid the toll. Only a week? Director Kim pressed. What happens after that? Seo took a ragged breath. Next week, it will demand another price. Stunned silence fell over the group. As the herb's sedative effect grew stronger, Seo's eyelids became heavy. I'm going to rest, he mumbled, and promptly fell asleep. He awoke 15 hours later, alone in the dark cave. Outside he could hear his colleagues' hushed, angry voices. How can you even say that after he sacrificed his own arm? Chief O was demanding of Jeon. So what's the plan? John shot back. Who's going to volunteer an arm or a leg every single week? Manager Seo is useful, Chief O argued. He found us food in this shelter. Exactly, Jeon said with cold logic. We learned everything we can from him for the next week. He's already lost an arm. He's not going to last long anyway. We make him the sacrifice again. Seo, listening from the shadows, felt a cold fury rise within him. Now that he was weak, John saw him as nothing more than livestock to be periodically butchered for their survival. His hand closed around a fist-sized rock. With the brutality he had learned over 50 years, killing a soft modern man like John would be easy, even with one arm. He watched as John continued trying to persuade the others. He raised the rock, his knuckles white. The urge to act was overwhelming, but he held back. Killing John now would be reckless. Fear was making them irrational, and a cruel act would permanently damage his standing with Director Kim. He let the rock drop and silently retreated into the cave. Suddenly, he heard Chief O's voice again, sharp and final. Shut your mouth, John, unless you want your other ankle broken. A small, grim laugh escaped Seo's lips. He was right. They were good people, just trapped in an impossible situation. The next morning, as the sun climbed the sky, The group gathered outside the cave. This time, a monstrous two-headed snake slithered into view. Unlike the ravenous fox, the two-headed snake only requested a small amount of blood. Seo recognized it as the same creature that, in his past life, had preyed on Chief O after he'd lost his limbs. This time, hearing the modest demand, a nervous Chief O offered his own arm. The snake took a sip and immediately recoiled, vomiting onto the forest floor. "Disgusting," it hissed. "This is the worst human blood I have ever tasted." Chief O flushed with anger, but Seo knew the truth. The blood of a 21st century office worker, saturated with nicotine and cholesterol, must have been truly foul. Seo turned his attention elsewhere. "John Myung-hun," he called out. "Come with me. We need to gather herbs." John stared, shocked. "Did you just use my full name?" Ignoring the question, Seo asked simply, "Are you hungry?" When John sullenly admitted he was, Seo walked over to him. "I'll teach you which fruits and herbs are edible." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I plan to offer my other arm to the fox next week. If I die, someone needs to know how to keep everyone else alive." The color drained from Jaeon's face. He realized with dawning horror that Seo had overheard their conversation last night. Trapped, he had no choice but to agree. "The thank you." Seo had to hide a smirk. "Thank me?" he thought. "The fox isn't coming back, and you'll never get the chance to use this knowledge anyway." He led John to a grove of fruit trees and began his tutelage. "John Myung-hun," Seo barked. "How many times do I have to tell you?" "Not that one. Concentrate." "Sorry," John mumbled, reaching for a different fruit. "That one will kill you," Seo said flatly. For hours, Seo relentlessly ordered Jian around, forcing him to dig and forage. Exhausted, Jian finally begged for a break, panting from the non-stop labor. A cold satisfaction settled over Seo. This was exactly how John had hazed him when he first joined the company. "We need to finish before dusk," Seo stated, offering no rest. "Hurry up." As they worked, John's shovel struck something large. He pulled it from the earth to reveal a massive gnarled root. "This thing is huge," he exclaimed. "Is this wild ginseng?" "Something like that," Seo replied vaguely. It was actually a yellow bamboo root. In the energy-rich soil of the Ascension Path, the normally pinky-sized roots grew to monstrous proportions. While useless to true cultivators, it was an incredibly precious herb for martial artists, capable of greatly increasing their internal ki. "This will be perfect for Director Kim," Seo thought. They unearthed 2 more just like it. "Is it really okay to take this much?" Jian asked, awestruck. "It's fine," Seo said. "Take off your shirt and wrap them up." As Jian complied, Seo glanced toward the horizon. He saw the sun dipping low and noticed a faint, shimmering distortion in the air, a crack in space. It was almost time. The cultivators were coming. "Let's head back," Seo announced. As they neared the cave, the shimmering crack in space exploded. A shockwave of pure spiritual energy erupted into the sky, and at that instant, John collapsed, clutching his head and screaming. Chief O and Manager Kang dropped to the ground alongside him, all 3 writhing in agony. "What's happening to them?" Director Kim cried in panic. Just then, 3 figures descended from the sky. The first, a man in radiant gold robes named Byuko, surveyed the screaming trio. "What a surprise," he mused. "To think we'd find such raw talent here." "Back off, Byuko," snarled a second man in black robes. "Haeogwak, they are mine." "Shameless," scoffed the third, who wore brilliant blue. Terrified, Director Kim stammered. The cultivators ignored him, their eyes scanning the group and dismissing the mortals. Only 3 possessed spiritual roots. Byuko raised a hand, and a crackling ball of lightning formed in his palm. He launched it at Jian, whose screams intensified as thousands of volts coursed through him. When the assault ceased, Byuko looked amazed. "Incredible, the physique of heavenly golden thunder." "My turn," Haeogwak said, pushing past him. He produced a strange musical instrument and began to play. Manager Kang, hands clamped over her ears, let out a shriek so powerful it echoed through the entire forest. Haeogwak's eyes widened with excitement. The ghostly yin, transforming immortal root. I never thought I'd see one in person. Finally, the cultivator in blue landed softly on the ground. He placed a hand on Chief O's shoulder, injecting a stream of spiritual energy into him. "A unique holy body," he determined. "What is going on?" Chief O gasped, overwhelmed. The cultivator smiled. "All 3 of you possess the talent to change the world. I will take you as disciples of the Azure Heaven Creation sect. How does that sound?" Chief O felt as though the man's very presence could crush him. He couldn't breathe, let alone refuse. Before he could answer, Haeogwak swooped down. "Join the Black Ghost Valley instead." We offer immortality, the power to overturn the heavens, fame and wealth. I will see to it you have it all within a century. Buko descended as well. What nonsense are you spouting? The Golden Divine Heavenly Thunder Sect is clearly the most suitable for them. As they argued, Director Kim stepped forward desperately. Please, can you just get us out of this forest? We'll all die here. They ignored him as if he were air. Buko uncapped a small bottle. Mortals worry far too much, he said with disdain, looking at Director Kim. How did you even reach the ascension path with such worthless bodies? He aimed the bottle at Jean, who was sucked inside with a final, desperate scream for help. The blue-robed cultivator prepared to leave with Chief O but paused to look at Seo. A small smile touched his lips. It seems one of you lost an arm to that fox. Judging by the wound, he offered it willingly. He gestured, and a wave of power washed over Seo. You may be a mere mortal, but you have guts. Seo stared as his arm completely regenerated. Thank you. After Haoguak had likewise secured Manager Kang, the three cultivators rose into the air. As they departed, their voices echoed back. We have cleared the ascension path of all beasts on our way here. It should be safe for the next 10 years. Wait! Director Kim shouted, chasing futilely after them. Hold on. Where do we go? Which way is out? He called their names. John, Chief O, Kang. But it was useless. They vanished into the sky. A wave of familiar disappointment washed over Seo. It had been the exact same 50 years ago. No matter how much they begged, the cultivators had treated them like insects. Still, he was relieved to have his arm back. Director Kim finally collapsed, gasping for breath. What are we supposed to do now? He despaired. But just as all hope seemed lost, he saw dozens more beams of light streaking across the sky, following the same path the cultivators had taken. Director Kim watched the lights, confused. What are all those streaks in the sky? He wondered aloud. Is something over there? Despite the mysterious sight, he couldn't abandon his team, so he turned back to the cave. The next day brought a fierce thunderstorm, with lightning cracking all around. The remaining four, Director Kim, Manager Kim, Deputy Manager O, and Seo, huddled together in the cave for shelter. Deputy Manager O's condition was worsening. She lay on the cold ground, coughing up blood. Seo, is there some kind of herb we can find? Manager Kim asked desperately, her voice filled with panic. She's in terrible shape. Knowing what was to come, Seo answered calmly. Let's just wait a little longer. Someone might show up to heal her. Manager Kim gave him a bewildered look. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the cave entrance. A figure emerged from the rain-swept darkness. Mortals in the ascension path, the stranger's voice resonated through the cave, are like ants caught in a battle between dragons. Director Kim immediately leaped in front of the others, shielding them. Who are you? He demanded. The man smiled, his presence filling the small space. I am the Sea Dragon King, Seo Huiol. The woman is controlling the storm, Seo Huiol announced. Everyone stared in shock. This tempest appeared from nothing, the Sea Dragon King explained, gesturing to the unconscious deputy manager O. She is the cause. She must be a master of storm sorcery. He looked intrigued, and yet, she is an ordinary mortal, without a trace of cultivation. How can she wield such power, and unconsciously at that? Very strange. We are the ones who are confused, Seo interjected. We've only been here a short time. Yet one powerful being after another shows up and takes our companions away. The Sea Dragon King broke into laughter. Are you telling me that you stumbled into this world with several colleagues of extraordinary potential? Then, as if on cue, powerful cultivators appeared to claim them. And now, here I am, conveniently standing before this woman. That's exactly what happened, Seo confirmed. The Sea Dragon King smiled. Dear mortal, do you know where you are? This is the Ascension Path, the gateway to the upper realm. In a few months, a dimensional rift, the Ascension Gate, will open nearby. This only happens once every 1,000 years. Countless cultivators and spiritual beings are already gathering here to ascend. Is it really so surprising that you would cross paths with us? The explanation finally clicked for Seo, but Director Kim was still confused. Those cultivators said they were taking our colleagues to join their sects. How can they do that if they're all ascending to another realm? A concept likely difficult for a mortal to grasp, Seo Huiol said patiently. He produced a bottle, similar to the one Buko had used. We have techniques to shrink vast structures and store them in magical tools like this. Those cultivators have likely stored their entire sects in such items, intending to bring everyone to the upper realm with them. In fact, he added, patting his own bottle, I have one of the undersea castles of my Sea Dragon clan stored right here. 1,800 of my kin lie dormant inside. SEO and Director Kim's jaws dropped. The Sea Dragon King gently patted Deputy Manager O's head. So peculiar, so intriguing. If she joins my clan, she could become something truly extraordinary. Get away from her, Director Kim shouted, lunging forward. He was instantly slammed to his knees, pinned by an immense invisible force. Every time he struggled, the pressure intensified. Seo Hueo lifted Deputy Manager O into his arms. I will give her my blood and accept her as my kin. This is the best outcome for all of you. He then turned his glowing green eyes on Director Kim. A piece of advice. Do not ask questions of high-level cultivators. As he spoke, the pressure on Director Kim and Seo doubled, feeling as if their very eyeballs would pop from their sockets. I answered your questions out of generosity, the Sea Dragon King said, walking toward the mouth of the cave. Most would have killed you for the impertinence. With that, he stepped into the raging storm, and his form exploded into that of a colossal dragon that seemed to touch the clouds. With a deafening roar, he soared into the sky. The next morning the storm was gone, replaced by clear, quiet skies. The silence was too much for Manager Kim. The avalanche, the monsters, the immortals, the abductions, it all crashed down on her at once. She began to lose her grip on reality. Seo approached her gently. Manager Kim. She grabbed his arm, her body shaking uncontrollably. Manager Seo, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. They can't take you too. If you're gone, I can't survive here alone. Seo wanted to promise her he would stay, to offer some small comfort. But looking at her devastated face, he knew. Unfortunately, their time was up. Just then, Manager Kim screamed, clutching her head. She collapsed to the ground, her eyes wide with terror. Something's coming, she shrieked. Director Kim rushed to her side. What's wrong with her now? Suddenly, the entire jungle erupted into chaos. Birds screeched from the sky and animals fled in a panicked stampede. Manager Kim trembled violently, gasping a single word. Before a confused Director Kim could react, an old man astride a great mechanical lion appeared before them. He looked down, shocked. Mortals! How did mere mortals find their way to the ascension path? He studied them for a moment, then chuckled. Ah, I see. The space around the ascension gate becomes unstable just before it opens. You must have been caught in a spatial storm. He laughed heartily, praising his own genius. Dismounting his lion, he approached the group. Now, which one of you just emitted that massive wave of consciousness? It was so powerful, I thought a sage from the upper realm had descended. His eyes fell on the whimpering Manager Kim. Was it her? Who are you? Director Kim demanded, stepping between the old man and Manager Kim. She's our colleague. With a casual flick of his finger, the old man sent Director Kim flying. Seo reacted instantly, lunging to catch his friend. He managed to break Director Kim's fall, but the force sent them both crashing violently to the ground. Thanks, Deputy Manager Seo, Director Kim said, scrambling to his feet, unharmed. Seo didn't respond. Panicked, Director Kim helped him up and gasped. The back of Seo's shirt was torn to shreds, revealing a raw, bloody injury from the impact. Seo, are you all right? Seo managed, his voice strained with pain. The old man ignored them completely. He strode over to Manager Kim and tilted her chin up with his fingers. Child, let me take you as my disciple. You have no spiritual root, but I can awaken one for you. I wonder, he mused to himself, what would happen if such a unique consciousness were to evolve into a cultivator's divine sense? Tears streamed down Manager Kim's face as she looked desperately towards Seo and Director Kim for help. The old man followed her gaze and scoffed. Still clinging to worldly attachments, even after I have offered to take you in? The old man's eyes flashed with anger. With a gesture, an invisible force seized Seo and Director Kim by the neck, hoisting them into the air. They clawed at their throats, struggling to breathe. I will sever your worldly attachments for you, the old man told Manager Kim coolly. Seeing her friends choking, Manager Kim grew hysterical. Please stop, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I'll do anything you ask. Just spare them. Then you must forget them, the old man commanded. I will. I understand, she sobbed. Satisfied, the old man released his grip, and Seo and Director Kim dropped to the ground gasping for air. But leaving them here will only prolong your attachment, the old man mused. I shall return them to a mortal nation. He waved his hand, and a swirling vortex of energy tore open the space before them. Your colleagues will be scattered through this dimensional rift, he informed Manager Kim. Not even I will know where they land. The portal's pull was immediate and overwhelming. Director Kim was sucked in before he could even comprehend what was happening. In the split second before he too was consumed, Seo lunged, grabbing the precious bundle of herbs he had collected. Then he was gone. Manager Kim could only watch and cry as the portal snapped shut, plunging everything into darkness. Then, sound rushed in, the din of a crowd, the cry of a street vendor, finest silks in all of Yangguo, newly arrived scriptures from Shengji. Seo was the first to wake, finding himself and an unconscious Director Kim sprawled on the cobblestones of an alleyway. He stumbled to his feet and peered out at a bustling street filled with unfamiliar faces. Where am I? He wondered. This wasn't the place he had landed in his first life. The old man had been telling the truth. Their destination was random. He stepped out of the alley and a strange sense of déjà vu washed over him. He scanned his surroundings, his eyes landing on a massive 10-story pagoda that dominated the skyline. Recognition struck him like a physical blow. He knew this place. He had lived here for 50 years. This was Seokyeong, the capital city of the Yangguo nation. After taking in the scene, he returned to the alley and roused Director Kim. Manager Seo, Director Kim groaned, his expression exhausted and bewildered. I can't keep up with any of this anymore. Seo sat beside him. I feel the same way, he admitted. I wish this was all just a dream. It's just the two of us now, Director Kim said, a note of disbelief in his voice. But I guess we should be grateful we weren't taken by those monsters. Seo remained silent. Even with his knowledge of the future, this was uncharted territory. In his past life, he was just a powerless herb gatherer. He knew nothing of this new beginning. We can't stay here forever, Seo finally said. Let's get out of this alley. Director Kim agreed, and the two of them stepped onto the main street. Immediately, they became the center of attention. People stared, pointing and whispering to each other in a language Director Kim didn't understand. What are they saying? He asked Seo, unnerved. It sounds like Chinese. Why is everyone staring at us? They're saying our clothes look funny, Seo told him calmly. Director Kim replied, shocked. Seo managed a small smile. Don't worry, I know a bit of Chinese. Director Kim opened his mouth to ask another question, but seeing the bloody state of Seo's back, he held his tongue and simply said, it was a lie, of course. The local language used similar characters to Chinese, but the pronunciation was completely different. In his past life, Seo had endured 2 months of ridicule from beggars just to learn the basics. This time there was no need for that. He produced the massive roots he'd salvaged. Should we get some new clothes? Director Kim looked confused. How? I doubt they'll take our money. Without explaining, Seo led him straight to the city's largest medicine hall. The owner's eyes went wide at the sight of the herbs. Are you really selling something so precious? He stammered. Seo put on a tough front. These yellow bamboo roots are at least 800 years old, he declared. Of course, the owner agreed, his hands trembling slightly. These are worth at least 15 silver ingots. The sum made even Seo's heart skip a beat. He'd never held that much money in his entire past life. He maintained his composure. Then hurry up and pay us. Yes, yes. The owner quickly counted out the silver. With their newfound wealth, they bought new clothes and, to Director Kim's astonishment, a small house. We're going to live here? He asked, dumbfounded. Yes, Seo confirmed. And from today, I'll teach you the language. Director Kim beamed, thanking him profusely. Seo acted as if everything was fine, but after bribing some officials for identity plaques and purchasing the house, they were left with just a single silver ingot. The capital is an expensive place, he thought grimly. Later, Director Kim noticed that the back of Seo's new shirt was already stained red with blood. Seeing how much Seo had done for him, an idea struck him. Since we're starting over in a new place, he began, why don't you just call me by my name? Seo looked up, surprised. If you're okay with that. Director Kim smiled warmly. Thank you, Seo Yunyun. That night, after they had settled in, Seo laid out the 2 remaining roots on the table. I sold one of these to get us started, he explained. But once these are gone, we'll have no income. We need to figure out a way to earn money. Director Kim stared at the roots, his mind racing. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. Let's sell the others, he proposed, and use the silver to start a business. It was a good plan. With their capital and Director Kim's business acumen from his former life, they could certainly make a living. But Seo found himself thinking, is making a living enough? I've regressed. Shouldn't I dream bigger than that? Seo knew Director Kim was a martial genius. In his past life, the man had become a master in months just by reading a third-rate manual. With proper training, he became one of the most powerful men in the Zhonghu. But what if, Seo thought, He learned advanced techniques from the very beginning. A smile crept onto his face. He could accelerate the birth of the world's greatest swordsman by 30 years and reap the benefits himself. Director Kim, Seo began, this world is called Muram. It's a world of martial arts. The words instantly caught his friend's attention. If we set up a business, who knows when some gang might come after us? Shouldn't we at least learn some self-defense? Director Kim's face lit up. Martial arts? He repeated, his voice full of excitement. But the sects don't teach outsiders. How would we learn? SEO hid a grin. As a former Muram novel nerd, he knew exactly how to hook him. This city has 7 major sects, he explained. On the orthodox side, you have the demon-slaying sect, the self-binding temple, the suppressing birdhouse, and the 7 mysteries sect. On the unorthodox side are the Wolf Fang Gang, the Dark Knight Association, and the dragon-fighting stronghold. The orthodox are called the 4 stars, the unorthodox the 3 demons. He continued, the demon-slaying sect focuses on sword and blade techniques. The self-binding temple is Buddhist. The suppressing birdhouse specializes in intelligence. And the 7 mysteries sect teaches a bit of everything. Not much is known about the 3 demons, other than that they're masters of stealth and sorcery. SEO paused. So, which one do you like? Without a moment's hesitation, Director Kim replied, the demon-slaying sect. A true martial artist wields a blade. It was a fitting choice for the man who would one day be called the world's greatest swordsman. How do you know all this? Director Kim asked, suddenly suspicious. SEO just laughed. I overheard some martial artists talking earlier. 3 months later, after selling the last of the roots, they stood before the gates of the demon-slaying sect. A muscular guard blocked their path. What do you want? My older brother and I have heard of the sect's fame and wish to learn its martial arts, Seo said politely. The guard eyed their fine clothes but scoffed. He's a bit old to start learning, the guard said, gesturing to Director Kim. Seo discreetly pressed a silver coin into the guard's hand. Could we perhaps speak to someone of higher status? Even simple self-defense training would be enough. The bribe worked. The guard led them inside to meet with a sect elder. You wish to learn self-defense? The elder asked. You wish to learn the best you have to offer, Seo declared, placing a heavy box of silver on the table between them. The elder's eyes widened at the sight of the glittering nuggets. Very well, the elder conceded. I suppose one of you may join as an external disciple. He pocketed the silver. But know this. We offer no special treatment for donations, and we will only accept one of you. Seo was stunned. All that silver, the price of a priceless bamboo root, for a single, unsupported disciple slot. Director Kim looked outraged, ready to protest, but Seo quickly cut him off. We accept, Seo said with a bow. My brother will be the one to learn. Director Kim stared at him, speechless. As the elder left, he instructed Director Kim to join the other external disciples in the training yard. Once he was gone, Director Kim turned on Seo. What's the point if only I'm learning? If I'd known it was this expensive, I would have chosen another sect. Don't worry about it, Seo said with a reassuring smile. I was never good at sports anyway. I'll use the remaining money to start a business and support you. You just focus on mastering the sword. Director Kim was floored by the sacrifice. I'll do my best, he promised, though his voice was hesitant. I don't know if I can do it. Believe in yourself, Seo said firmly. You can. With a final grateful nod, Director Kim headed for the training yard. 7 months later, the demon-slaying sect was in an uproar. At an internal competition, an outsider, a man who had only been training for 7 months, had single-handedly defeated every one of their prized disciples. The sect elders watched from their platform, their faces a mixture of fury and disbelief. Mastering a martial art requires a deep understanding of its core principles, and a body perfectly attuned to its movements. But some talents are so profound they seem to laugh at the conventional process, soaring through stages that take others decades to cross. The demon-slaying sect, the greatest sect in Seokyeong, was filled with such talents. Yet, an outsider had just defeated them all. In a mere 7 months, Director Kim had not only learned their absolute dragon saber technique, but had become a first-rate warrior. The Grand Elder was furious. Reaching the first-rate stage was thought to be impossible without years of dedicated training, let alone for an outsider who had joined with a simple donation. It was a humiliation. It looked as though the sect's proud tradition had knelt before one man. He immediately ordered Director Kim to be captured. Now, Director Kim was imprisoned in a guarded house, suspected of being a spy, and for some reason, Seo was imprisoned with him. Aren't you worried? Seo asked, watching Director Kim calmly practice his sword forms. Director Kim just laughed. About what? About being a suspected spy, SEO exclaimed. In the novels, they destroy your key core for something like this. True, Director Kim admitted, pausing his practice. But for some reason, I feel like I'm about to break through another wall. If I can just cross it, I think I can reach the next stage. SEO stared at him, dumbfounded. What kind of monster are you? You just became a first-rate warrior and you're already nearing the next level. That next level was Martial Peak, a stage reached only by sect leaders and the most powerful elders. In the entire nation of Yanggo, only 1,000 so-called absolute masters had attained it. For all practical purposes, it was the final stage of martial arts. SEO's initial estimate had been wrong. This wouldn't speed up the birth of the world's greatest swordsman by 30 years, it would be closer to 40. For 7 days they remained in captivity. Director Kim spent every waking moment meditating and practicing. On the 7th day, the QE he had gathered coalesced above his head, forming 3 ethereal lotus flowers made of pure energy. SEO watched in awe. These were the flowers of Qi, a phenomenon only witnessed when a martial artist reached the absolute peak. Director Kim inhaled, and the lotuses dissolved into his body. He stood up, a newfound power radiating from him. "I've crossed the barrier," he said, a confident smile on his face. "I'm not so afraid of the demon-slaying sect's leader anymore." SEO could only laugh. "Your talent is beyond anything I could have imagined." "I'm impressed with myself too," Director Kim admitted. "I never knew I had it in me. Maybe that's why I always loved those martial arts novels." Just then, the door burst open. An elder, flanked by a squad of guards, strode in. "Here comes Jim Young-hoon and his comrade," he announced, unfurling a scroll. "By order of the sect leader, we are to destroy the key core of the spy who dared to steal the martial arts of the demon-slaying sect." Director Kim's expression hardened. SEO, terrified, tried to explain. "Wait, we're not spies. We were just—" The elder backhanded him across the face. "Silence. We have witnesses who heard you speaking in a strange coded language." He gestured to his men. "Restrain them." But before the guards could move, Director Kim's sword was in his hand. In a flash of steel too fast to follow, the elder's sword hand was severed, his own weapon clattering to the floor. The room froze. Director Kim leveled his blade at the stunned elder's throat. "This is the first sect I have ever joined," he said, his voice cold as ice. "I am no spy." A guard lunged, ignoring the elder's fate. Before his blade even came close, Director Kim moved, a blur of motion. In seconds, every guard in the room was on the ground, clutching their disarmed hands. The survivors scrambled away, screaming that he was a peak-level master, running to inform the sect leader. "I'm going to visit the other sects," Director Kim said calmly amidst the chaos. "What will you do?" "I'll go with you," CEO replied immediately. "Let's start with the dragon-fighting stronghold." Director Kim grinned. "You go on ahead. I'll meet you there after I deal with the elders and their leader." A few hours later, CEO stood panting at the top of the dragon-fighting stronghold's highest peak. Director Kim was already there, leaning casually on his sword. "What took you so long?" he asked. "You're just too fast," Seo gasped, his eyes drawn to the blood dripping from Director Kim's blade. He remembered a time when his friend had lectured him about violence. This world had changed them. He wished they could go back, not to the day they arrived, but all the way back to their mundane lives on Earth. If he regressed again, that's what he would wish for. But for now, they had to do what was necessary to survive. After the betrayal by the demon-slaying sect, Director Kim conquered the dragon-fighting stronghold. Over the next 2 years, he traveled across Yanggo, defeating every major sect. By the 3rd year, having shattered the emblems of every house, he was known as the greatest martial artist under the heavens. He used this fame to unite the fractured martial world, creating the Martial Alliance. 7 years passed. Director Kim and Seo became as close as blood brothers. One day, Director Kim presented Seo with a custom martial arts manual. "This is the Severing Mountain Sword," he said. "I created it for you, hoping you will inherit a will strong enough to cut down mountains. If you master this, you can reach Martial Peak." SEO was stunned. The manual, which included the Dragon Vein Qi method, was a true first-rate art, far beyond anything he had ever seen. He began practicing immediately, but the result was always the same. He would be on the ground before he even knew what happened. "You really have no talent," Director Kim would say with a sigh. It was true. Even with a personalized technique created by the world's best and one-on-one training, Seo barely scraped his way to the 3rd-rate level after a full year. "It can't be helped," Seo finally admitted. "At least I have some talent for medicine. Everyone is good at something, I suppose." Then, a decade after their arrival, Seo witnessed a miracle. As Director Kim meditated, 5 spheres of pure kui, like radiant flowers, bloomed above his head. SEO knew this was the legendary 5 energies converging to the origin. A massive wave of internal energy erupted from Director Kim's body. The sound of cracking bones and shifting joints filled the air as his white hair darkened to black. The transformation was a divine spectacle, releasing so much power that Seo couldn't even stand nearby. When the light subsided, Seo stared in shock. Before him stood a young man. It was Director Kim, but decades younger. "What's so surprising?" the young Director Kim asked, his voice now youthful and vibrant. "Brother," Seo stammered, "you look younger than me." This was skeletal restructuring, a legendary rebirth. Director Kim laughed, a sound full of life. "I feel like I could do anything." "The world will be shocked when they see you," Seo said. "Certainly," Director Kim agreed, pulling on his robes. He walked over to Seo, a serious expression on his new face. "It's about time I handed over the martial alliance to the next leader." Seo knew his friend was right. The leader of the martial alliance needed to be a master, but no one seemed to truly understand the essence of martial arts. "That's because you're an anomaly," Seo laughed. "Where else in the world is there a genius like you?" Director Kim gazed out at the disciples training in the courtyard. "Even so, we need to find someone." 25 years later, Seo sat in a quiet room, his hand guiding a brush over paper. 35 years had passed since he'd begun this new life. His hair was now gray, and at 65, he often wondered where the perpetually young Director Kim was. A year after his transformation, his friend had retired as alliance leader. SEO had wanted to retire too, but he was needed to stabilize the chaotic martial world and had remained as the alliance's strategist for many years. Director Kim had said he wanted to wander the world. He hadn't even come to Seo's retirement ceremony. Now Seo stepped outside for some fresh air, the loneliness of his large retirement home closing in on him. It was far too big for one person. A rustle in the bushes startled him. "Who's there?" he called out, his senses on alert. He moved closer and was stunned to see a familiar face emerge, dressed in rags. It was Director Kim. "What's with the beggar's outfit?" SEO demanded. "Why didn't you come to my retirement? Where have you been?" Director Kim just laughed, a weary sound, and collapsed onto the grass. "Did something happen?" SEO asked, rushing to his side. Staring up at the sky, Director Kim spoke. "I truly thought I was a martial genius. Isn't that right, Seo? If I'm not a genius, what am I?" He sat up, a self-deprecating look on his face. "I am a martial arts genius. At least in this kingdom, among ordinary people like me, no one can match my talent." "Ordinary?" SEO scoffed. "How are you ordinary? Everyone under the heavens knows you as the world's #1. I fought them," Director Kim interrupted, his voice low and serious. "The cultivators. Do you remember them, Seo? The monsters who took our friends 35 years ago?" Of course, Seo remembered. He'd lived it twice. He knew the cultivators secretly manipulated the Yan Kingdom from the shadows. As the martial alliance grew, the cultivators began to interfere more directly. To defy them was to defy the nation itself, a risk Director Kim wouldn't take. So, he had stepped down as leader to hunt them as a lone warrior. "They were impossible to find," Director Kim continued. "And when I did find one, they'd just laugh and say I wasn't worth their time before vanishing with some illusion. But 5 years ago, I finally got my fight." "Did you win?" SEO asked, leaning in eagerly. Director Kim confirmed. Seo laughed with relief. "If you'd pulled a stunt like that when you were alliance leader, I'd have dragged you back by the scruff of your neck." But Director Kim shook his head, his expression grim. He was in the chi condensation realm. "I fought with everything I had, and I barely managed to scratch his fingertip." The words hit Seo like a physical blow. "He said if I could graze his body, he'd count it as my win," Director Kim clarified. "So, technically, I won. But still," the disappointment in his voice was palpable. "Was this cultivator one of their great masters or something?" SEO asked, trying to grasp the situation. Director Kim said, his voice barely a whisper. "He told me his realm was the second lowest in the entire cultivation world. In our terms, he was just a second-rate warrior." SEO was stunned into silence. "What nonsense are you talking about?" he finally managed. He knew cultivators were powerful, but Director Kim's martial arts were godlike. He could walk on air, slice through ancient steel as if it were tofu. And yet, this genius could only scratch the fingertip of a bottom-tier cultivator? "I was a frog in a well," Director Kim said, his face etched with disappointment. "We can never stand against them, Seo. They're like natural disasters." A cold sweat broke out on Seo's skin. The stories were terrifying. Then, Director Kim pulled a severed hand from his pocket. Today, though, he said with a grim smile. I took his wrist. Hope surged in Seo. Doesn't that mean you've surpassed him? Director Kim replied flatly. He just slapped a talisman on the stump and a new hand grew back. He stood up, his shoulders slumping. It seems my martial path ends here. What do you mean? Seo asked, his heart sinking. I came to say goodbye. He let out a hollow laugh. The cultivator said he respected my willpower. He's offered to take me into his sect. I'll probably start as the lowest ranking disciple. Become a cultivator? An immortal? Seo asked. But they said it was impossible without spiritual roots. For a mortal, reaching the stage of 5 energies converging to the origin is the equivalent of being born with the 5-element spiritual root, Director Kim explained. We have to spend our entire lives just to manifest the basic quality they are born with. He raised his sword, and with a single, fluid motion, he sliced open the very fabric of space, creating a shimmering doorway in the air. I'm going now, he said, stepping toward the portal. I have to aim for a higher stage. Before disappearing, he tossed a book to Seo. My last gift to you. Stay safe. And then he was gone. Seo looked at the title, Record of Transcending Cultivation and Exhausting Martial Arts. It was a journal of one man's attempt to surpass gods through sheer will. He stared at the empty space where his friend had been. Where are you going without me? He whispered, but only silence answered. And so, the years passed. 50 years after his arrival in this world, Seo lay on his deathbed, succumbing to a common cold, just like the first time. It was fate. No matter how a man struggled, he could never escape it. In the end, the only things that had changed were the quality of his house and his bed. He died on the exact same day. He had lived this life to its absolute fullest, desperate to avoid the regrets of his past. He had been too busy to even consider marriage. He had united the martial sects of Yangguo and experienced all the fame and wealth a mortal could desire. But a profound emptiness echoed in his heart. If we had just struggled a little harder, he wondered, could we have reached the sky together? His body trembled with a sense of utter powerlessness. The regret was overwhelming, and so marked the end of Seo's second regression. After dying for the second time, Seo's eyes, which had gone blurry just a few seconds ago, opened again. He looked around and saw that he was in the same forest on the ascension path. Looking down, he noticed that his body was brimming with energy. Seeing that, he realized that regression wasn't just a one-time thing. As he was lost in thought, Section Chief John suddenly charged at him in anger, shouting, "Deputy Manager Seo, you bastard!" But as John swung his hand to slap him, Seo reacted instantly and dodged the attack. John kept trying to punch him, but Seo effortlessly evaded every strike. He wasn't even paying attention to John. His mind was elsewhere. Why did I regress? He wondered. He knew that a new body full of energy and a fresh opportunity was undoubtedly a good thing. But what about everything he had built over the past 50 years? Meanwhile, John was growing exhausted. Still swinging his fists, he screamed that Seo had almost gotten them all killed, and now he had the nerve to dodge? But Seo didn't respond. He just kept thinking, is this really a good thing? He already knew the truth. It wasn't. This was a curse that denied him the meaning of life. Sure, a couple of regressions might feel like a blessed opportunity, but if this were to go on forever, Seo would be trapped in fate's wheel, forced to wallow in the suffering of life until the end of time. Moreover, he couldn't even meet the people he knew in his previous life again. The people in front of him now were simply beings who shared the appearance of those he once cared for. Director Kim, whom he had thought of as an older brother, no longer existed in this world. Watching John exhausting himself with futile punches, Director Kim finally intervened, saying, "That's enough." Seo then told John to calm down and asked, "What help will being angry bring here?" Hearing that, John became even angrier and called Seo shameless. But before he could say more, Seo spoke again. "In the first place, John, you were on driving duty today. I warned you before you forced me to drive that I hadn't slept last night, because of the work you offloaded on me." Seo turned to leave and asked, "How would I have even dodged an incoming avalanche on a narrow road?" He advised John to stop pointing fingers and think instead about what they needed to do next. John was speechless. He was used to Seo always accepting blame and apologizing. Seo then turned to Director Kim and mistakenly called him by his name, just like he had in his previous life, but he immediately corrected himself. He told Director Kim that he would search for a place where they could stay before sunset and asked everyone else to look for the car or any possible way out of the forest. He added, When the sun sets, I'll light a fire, so come to it. SEO wasn't trying to please anyone anymore. He wasn't building relationships because deep down, he knew. What's the point of making bonds with people who would disappear again? In the end, he would always be alone. As the sun set, Seo lit the fire. After searching for the car, the others returned and saw the fire, Seo sitting beside it, the others asleep. But only Seo was awake, his eyes wide with fear. He feared the unending regression, the infinite loop of time. He knew this ability had to be removed and wondered if it would vanish if he somehow returned to Earth. But seeing how he always regressed back to this moment on the ascension path, he didn't know how to go home. He remembered what the old cultivator had said. When the ascension gate opens, nearby spaces destabilize. Ordinary humans could have been caught in spatial storms. Realizing that the ascension gate existed, Seo thought it must be related to why they fell into this world. And maybe, just maybe, they could return to their original world using it. He decided that first, he must grow stronger. As an ordinary mortal, he couldn't accomplish anything. He needed to become a cultivator like Director Kim and start cultivating. Once he gained a longer lifespan through cultivation, he would be able to research the Ascension Gate properly. That night, SEO came out of the cave. Looking up at the sky, he resolved to become a cultivator and reach the Ascension Gate. The next day, as the sun rose, Seo left the cave and ventured into the forest. He went to the same place where he had previously found those 1,000-year-old ginsengs. He dug out as many as he could and began eating them immediately, without stopping. As he ate them, he could feel strong chi quakes within his core. In his previous life, he hadn't known any heart methods, so eating these yellow bamboo roots would have done nothing. But now, using the Dragon Vein Chi method that Director Kim had made for him, he could break through the blocked chi passageways. SEO's heart, once extremely polluted, slowly began to cleanse itself. It started beating as it had when he was born. SEO began sweating heavily as he cultivated, but he understood. It wasn't easy to heal a body soaked in preservatives, fast food, and stress. Still, he didn't give up. He continued. After eating those ginsengs, he went to train his body. He took a tree branch and, using rocks, carefully carved it into the shape of a sword. Looking at the somewhat sword-like stick, Seo thought, that should do the work. He started swinging his sword, recalling the training he had undergone in his previous life with Director Kim. He remembered his footwork and the way he used to swing his blade. In his past life, he had only been an average second-rate martial artist, and since he hadn't practiced near the end of his life, his skills had dulled. Of course, he wasn't completely helpless. He swung his wooden sword at a nearby tree, using the Severing Mountain Sword first form. With just a wooden sword, Seo cut into the tree and left a deep mark. He could do this because the martial arts from his previous life were still all in his head. So, improving his skills was just a matter of time. But unknown to Seo, his sword practice had been witnessed by Director Kim, who had wandered into the forest. Director Kim was utterly shocked and called out from behind asking, "What was that just now?" He ran up to Seo demanding, "How did you slash a tree with a wooden stick? Just what is that strength?" Seeing how excited Director Kim was, Seo smiled inside, thinking, "This is the man who will instruct me to become a cultivator." Seo turned to Director Kim and asked if he wanted to try learning this technique. Hearing that, Director Kim's face lit up with excitement. He asked Seo, "Can I really do it?" But before Seo could reply, something suddenly appeared and destroyed the tree where he had been practicing. It was none other than the nine-tailed fox. The nine-tailed fox glared at them angrily and shouted, "Filthy humans! How dare you play around in front of the master of this forest?" Seeing the nine-tailed fox, Director Kim was completely stunned. And not just him, even Seo grew nervous. He had completely forgotten about the nine-tailed fox. In his second life, the nine-tailed fox had mercilessly bitten off Seo's arm. At that moment, Seo knew. The only thing he could do now was endure. As the fox tore apart his arm, Seo slightly eased the pain by applying pressure to his own acupoint, because he knew he was weak. In his first life, and even in his second, he had been weak. But now, in this third life, as the nine-tailed fox appeared before him, Seo took a deep breath and walked toward it. Scared, everyone called out to Seo from behind, telling him not to go there. But Seo didn't listen and continued walking toward the nine-tailed fox. Even now, in his third regression, he still didn't know how his second life had ended that way. In his previous life, Seo had decided to become a cultivator after reaching the 5-path core. But even after learning martial arts under the best master for over 100 years, he was barely considered a second-rank mastery warrior. Seo grabbed one arm with the other and used his strength to cut off his own arm, because he knew that, compared to the people gathered here, his talent was trash. Seeing Seo cut off his own arm, everyone was shocked and terrified. Seo offered the severed arm to the nine-tailed fox to eat, because whether it took 1,000 years or 10,000, he was determined not to give up. Seeing Seo willingly offer his own arm, the nine-tailed fox laughed and said, "Human, you know your place. You know how to offer yourself as a sacrifice." The nine-tailed fox then decided to have a taste of Seo's arm. Hearing that, Seo silently resolved to offer his arm to the fox, until the day he surpassed its strength. After the fox ate Seo's arm, it allowed them to stay and then disappeared. Seo didn't care about the others. He simply went to a quiet place in the forest and kept swinging his sword. After a few days, the cultivators healed his arm and escorted his colleagues away. But Seo didn't eat, sleep, or rest. He kept swinging his sword. The only reason he stopped swinging on the 4th day was because the Sea Dragon King arrived. Seo greeted the Sea Dragon King with respect and said, "This lowly mortal dares to ask the Sea Dragon King a question." Seeing how respectful Seo was, the Sea Dragon King allowed him to speak. Seo asked, "It seems the Sea Dragon King wishes to take Miss O. But Miss O is just an ordinary person without spiritual roots, and ordinary humans cannot live longer than 100 years. So, what are your intentions toward her?" Hearing that, the Sea Dragon King laughed and said that Seo was quite an observant mortal, someone who understood the state of cultivators well, but he told them not to worry. Once Miss O accepted his blood, she would awaken spiritual roots suitable for her. Seo was surprised to hear that, and asked the Sea Dragon King if, perhaps, he could give them a chance as well, since Miss O was from the same hometown, and maybe they too might possess some hidden ability. Hearing that, the Sea Dragon King smiled and told Seo to listen carefully. Just as he said that, Seo felt an overwhelming pressure on his chest and collapsed to the ground. The Sea Dragon King said, "I will say one thing out of concern. Do not carelessly express your opinions to a high-ranking cultivator like me. We have lived for hundreds, even thousands of years. We see what mortals cannot see. We know what mortals do not know." He looked at Seo with glowing green eyes and continued, "You have a good temperament, so I'll let it slide, but there are cruel ones who, just because your eyes met theirs, would tear you apart like insects and kill you." Saying that, the Sea Dragon King walked out of the cave with Miss O, then transformed into his dragon form and flew back into the sky. Seeing the Sea Dragon King's true form, Director Kim was completely shocked. The next day, as the weather cleared and everyone came out of the cave, they encountered the old cultivator riding a mechanical lion. As the old cultivator appeared, Seo stepped forward, greeted him, and asked, "Our colleague Miss Kim is just an ordinary person without spiritual roots, so how could she possibly become your disciple?" Hearing that, the old cultivator laughed and took out an elixir, telling Seo that it was a very precious one, capable of opening spiritual channels. If taken, even an ordinary person might gain the chance to become immortal. Seo was shocked to hear that there was another way to become a cultivator. The old cultivator explained that it was possible for mortals to reach the realm of the five-path core by pushing their martial arts to the extreme, but that path took far too long and the results were unsatisfactory. So this method, through elixirs, was the best. After telling them everything, the old cultivator opened a portal to the mortal world and sent them into it, saying that both of them were useless to him now and should just get lost. Both Seo and Director Kim fell into the teleportation portal, while Miss Kim could only watch them disappear, screaming. Seo lost consciousness there, and the next time he opened his eyes, he found himself hanging from a tree branch above the ground. Looking ahead, he saw a vast forest with some buildings in the distance. Seeing that, Seo realized this was the southwestern root army of the Yan Kingdom from his past life. Just like in the second regression, he had wandered all over the Yan Kingdom with Director Kim. Having traveled the Yan Kingdom for over 100 years, there were almost no places he didn't know now. Seo climbed down from the tree and woke up Director Kim. After waking him up, both of them headed toward a nearby castle. Seo explained the situation to Director Kim, who seemed flustered, but perhaps because so much had already happened, he accepted most of it. A few days later, they arrived at the nearest Tiger Wall Castle. There, they sold herbal medicine from the Immortal Ascending Village and bought a house. Seo began teaching Director Kim how to write and speak the local language, as well as how to use the Severing Mountain Blade, which Director Kim had originally created in his second regression. SEO even modified the technique to better suit the weapon Kim used. As he watched Director Kim train, Seo felt a bit disappointed with himself because Director Kim had reached the Three Blossoms Crown Peak just 3 months after starting martial arts training, while Seo had spent 2 entire lifetimes just to barely reach the first-rate level. After reaching peak level, Director Kim got excited and said, "If it's now, I think I could even beat you." Hearing that, Seo smiled, realizing the man in front of him wasn't the same big brother he once served in a past life. This Director Kim was mentally much younger than him. In terms of how long Seo had lived, he was now old enough to be Director Kim's grandfather, so Seo decided he shouldn't stay with him in this life. He gave Director Kim martial arts scrolls and the exhausting record of transcending, a book Kim had created in his previous life. He told Director Kim that from today onward, he would be going his own way. Hearing that, Director Kim was shocked and asked, "What do you mean by that? Did I make a mistake? Is that why you're leaving? What's the reason?" When Director Kim asked for a reason, Seo remembered what had happened during his first regression. Director Kim had become the Martial Alliance leader, but fell into despair after losing to the Cultivators. The second regression wasn't much different. Director Kim developed the record of transcending cultivation and exhausting martial arts, then created the record of martial arts surpassing through cultivation. He fought against the cultivators, but in the end, he was overwhelmed by a stronger one and fell to the ground. After that, Director Kim disappeared, saying he would become a cultivator, abandoning the path of martial arts. And Seo thought, maybe this life would end the same way. But this time, he no longer wanted to see his brother Kim fall into that same despair again. So Seo made an excuse, telling Director Kim that he wanted to travel alone to improve his skills. Hearing that, Director Kim asked Seo if he couldn't just do that with him. He questioned, "How am I supposed to live without you?" Seo told Director Kim that with his martial arts skills at the current level, he should be able to live just fine. He reminded him that he had already taught him how to speak, write, and even practice martial arts. Now that Director Kim was a top expert, there was nothing more to worry about. But Director Kim still wasn't convinced. He asked Seo, "Do I really have to be separated from my hometown friends again?" Seo was surprised to hear that. So, he told Director Kim, "Starting from today, let's meet here once every 2 years." Hearing that, Director Kim finally agreed. After persuading Director Kim, who was feeling lonely, Seo left the house. Sometime later, a disciple of the 8 Stronghold Pavilion came out and asked, "What's this commotion in front of the 8 Stronghold Pavilion?" The person he asked was Seo. Seo greeted him and replied that he had come to request a duel at the 8 Stronghold Pavilion. Hearing this, the disciple laughed and said, "This pavilion is not a place where just anyone can show up." But before the disciple could finish his words, Seo drew his sword and swung, cutting down the disciple's blade in a single strike, shocking everyone nearby. After cutting the blade, Seo asked the disciple, "Do I still look like a nobody to you?" Seo had made up his mind. He was determined. He would definitely become stronger. After challenging the 8 Stronghold Pavilion and breaking one of their disciples' blades, Seo was welcomed inside. Once inside, a girl came to escort him. She politely asked him to follow her to the inner quarters, saying that the sect leader was waiting there. Seo followed the girl into the inner quarters, where she led him to an arena. The sect leader was already waiting, and the audience was made up of the disciples of the 8 Stronghold Pavilion. When the sect leader saw Seo, he smiled and said he was curious to see who this first-rate master would be, only to find such a young junior. Seo respectfully greeted him, saying, "This humble one, Seo Yun-hyun, greets the sect leader of Palgyeonggak." Hearing that, the sect leader laughed and praised Seo, saying his energy was extraordinary. Seo returned the praise, complimenting the sect leader's powerful presence, and asked him for his guidance. Without hesitation, the sect leader drew his weapon, a spear whip. Swinging it skillfully, he said, "Then I shall begin first." Seo also drew his sword, preparing for battle. The sect leader moved with lightning speed, aiming at Seo's legs, but Seo quickly dodged. However, that attack was just a feint. As Seo leapt into the air, the sect leader infused energy into his spear whip and launched another attack, this time aimed at Seo's head. It took Seo by surprise, but he countered effortlessly by moving his sword with lightning speed, deflecting the attack. The disciples of the 8 Stronghold Pavilion were shocked to see their sect leader's 9-section whip being blocked by a sword. Observing Seo's reaction speed, the sect leader was impressed and said, "Young warrior, you've achieved the state of sword-body unity. You're already at the late stage of first rate. SEO humbly praised the sect leader in return, acknowledging that he had completely merged with martial arts. He added that, thanks to their exchange, he had gained insight into a new technique. The sect leader laughed and replied, "To be at my level at such a young age. SEO, you truly are a genius." Hearing the word genius, Seo laughed. To him, being called a genius wasn't a compliment. It might be surprising that someone who looked to be in his late 20s had reached such a high level, one that normally takes decades of training. Seo smiled and thanked the sect leader for complimenting his insufficient talent. In truth, Seo believed he was just one of countless mediocre dullards in the world. Heaven hadn't granted him talent, but even as such a dullard, through regression, he had trained his martial arts to a level comparable to a true genius. Seo thought to himself, regression. Perhaps that is both my ability and my opportunity. And with that thought, he decided to become a genius. Pointing his sword at the sect leader, Seo declared that he would now use sword energy. The sect leader nodded and replied that he too would go all out. Seo then used the first move of the Duan Yue sword art and struck at the sect leader. The sect leader swiftly dodged to the right, avoiding the attack, but Seo didn't give him a chance to counter. He immediately used the second move, entering the mountain, and attacked from below. The sect leader blocked it with his spear whip and stepped back. Seo charged forward again, using the third move, ascending the vein, to attack. The sect leader once more blocked the strike. He then stepped back and unleashed his energy, infusing it into the spear whip before attacking again. He swung with lightning speed, launching attacks from multiple directions in an attempt to overwhelm Seo. But Seo didn't falter. He blocked every strike. The sect leader was shocked. What is this monstrous sword art that I can't break through, he wondered. The sect leader aimed once again at Seo's legs, trying to disrupt his balance, but it was no use. Seo jumped and dodged once more. While Seo was midair, he used the seventh move of the Duan Yue sword art, Deed Mountain, and charged straight at the sect leader with incredible speed. It looked as if Seo was attacking with 1,000 swords, and the sect leader was unable to dodge. He couldn't predict Seo's sword trajectory and barely managed to evade, only to have his cheek sliced. Seeing this, the disciples of the 8 Stronghold Pavilion were shocked, exclaiming, "This can't be!" Seo's sword speed was increasing with every move. Then, Seo unleashed the 11th move, destroying the ground. The sect leader jumped back and dodged, but the disciples were stunned. It wasn't just Seo's speed, the sword was gaining destructive power as well. Seo charged again, this time with an energy-infused strike. The sect leader blocked it with his own energy-infused spear whip. The collision released a massive burst of energy. After taking Seo's attack head-on, the sect leader's hand began to tremble. Seeing this, Seo decided to end the fight here. He leapt high into the sky and used the 12th move, 7 Lights Emerging Peak. The sect leader also prepared to strike, but Seo swung his energy-infused sword with such overwhelming speed and force that it shattered the sect leader's spear whip into thousands pieces, completely stunning everyone. Not just the sect leader, even the disciples of the 8 Stronghold Pavilion were in shock. Seo's attack didn't just destroy the spear whip, it also cut the sect leader's hand. Gripping his injured hand in pain, the sect leader admitted defeat. Upon hearing that, Seo immediately sheathed his sword and respectfully greeted the sect leader, saying it had been a valuable opportunity. With that, he left the arena. Their match had completely destroyed the battleground. After defeating the sect leader of the 8 Stronghold Pavilion, Seo departed from the sect. As he walked out, everyone stared at him in silent awe. It had been a clean and honorable fight. Seo remembered that Palgyeonggak had been famous even in his past life as a righteous sect that didn't resort to cowardly acts. Inspired by this, he decided to visit a demonic sect next. Through these martial duels, Seo thought, in this life, I must reach the peak realm. As time passed, Seo visited about 4 more minor sects in Seogyeongsong. Among them, he lost duels at Iljubo and Huyongmun, but won against sects like Gaejubang and Yukgyolbo. Eventually, he arrived at Hoedangpa, where he fought one of their warriors. Seo cut down the warrior's blade and sent him flying with a single blow. The warrior crashed near his sect master and was knocked unconscious from Seo's overwhelming attack. Seeing this, the sect leader of Hoedangpa laughed and said, "So the young first-rate master who's been challenging sects all over Seogyeongsong recently was you after all." He told Seo that he had witnessed his skills well. Seo respectfully greeted him and said he too had learned a lot. Just then, many warriors emerged from the door behind the sect leader. The sect leader turned to Seo and asked if he was ready, because now it was the turn of the 10 elders. Seo was stunned. What is this? He thought. Is this the demonic sect's way? He asked the sect leader. Didn't the duel just end with my victory? I've never heard of continuous battles or a 10-on-1 duel. With a sly smirk, the sect leader replied, Really? Didn't you just hear? Hearing that, Seo realized the sect leader was playing with words. Trying to intimidate him, Seo said, If I publicly reveal today's cowardice to the other sects, Hoedangpa's reputation will plummet. The sect leader laughed and replied, I don't care, because you'll get injured in this duel, that injury will get infected, and you'll die of tetanus. The sect leader told Seo that the people would believe their sect had taken great care of him, and that despite their best efforts, Seo had unfortunately passed away. As the 10 elders stepped forward, the sect leader laughed and said, How can a dead man spread a different rumor? This situation was even worse than Seo had anticipated. They're absolute lunatics, he thought. All the elders pointed their swords at Seo. The sect leader declared that if they killed him here, it wouldn't affect their reputation. It sounded extremely dangerous. But Seo smiled. This was exactly why he came. He pulled out his sword and challenged the sect leader, saying he would accept this absurd duel. The 10 elders charged at Seo, and thus began a true battle. As the sun set over Hoedangpa, the streets of the city lit up in celebration. People filled the inns, drinking and enjoying the evening. At one table, a drunk man told his friends, I heard the young master who's been challenging every sect to duels went to fight Hoedangpa this time. What a pity for such a talented youth. His friend nodded. Challenging an illegal organization like the evil sect? That's just asking to die. A third chimed in. That's how it is when you're young, thinking the world will go your way? A kind of innocence, I suppose. Another man from a nearby table stood up and scoffed. That guy relied too much on his skill and acted recklessly. He brought about his own death. Hoedangpa may look like a sect, but inside, it's nothing more than a bandit's den. He's probably buried by now. Just then, the door to the inn creaked open. A man stepped in, his shoes soaked in blood. The waiter turned to welcome the guest, but froze in shock. It was Seo, his body covered in blood and dotted with minor injuries. He calmly ordered a bowl of noodles. The entire inn fell silent. The waiter nervously gestured. Please, come in and sit down. Seo walked forward, and as he passed, everyone instinctively lowered their heads. None dared meet his eyes. It was the natural reaction. His expression was terrifying. Seo was furious at those maniacs from Hoedangpa. He had almost died. It hadn't just been 10 against 1. They'd even poisoned their weapons, cowardly striking his back. It was fortunate Seo had studied top-tier medicine during his time as a strategist for the Martial Alliance. If he hadn't taken the antidote pills and stimulants he had prepared in advance, he would have surely died. He killed all 10 elders. But just before the end, the crazed old sect leader gave a desperate final order. He shouted for all his disciples to kill Seo no matter what. Soon, a horde of foot soldiers armed with spears and arrows swarmed the area, forming a battle formation. Seo fought like a beast. No techniques, no form, just sheer will to survive. Yet he endured. He cut the meridians of the surviving enemies to cripple them, ensuring they'd never seek revenge. And then, he finished it. He killed their sect leader. Now, sitting at the table, Seo looked at his own trembling hand, perhaps from the excessive stimulants. The tension wouldn't go away. He sighed, knowing he wouldn't sleep for days. Grabbing his sword again, he understood. He had to duel another orthodox sect next. After finishing his bowl of noodles, Seo stood up and walked out of the inn, revealing a large bleeding cut across his back. No one said a word. They simply watched, stunned. The young master, after surviving a brutal battle with Hoedangpa, had calmly eaten noodles and immediately left for another duel. That crazy young man quickly became the talk of the city, and so Seogyeong City buzzed with excitement. People began calling him by a new name, one that echoed through taverns, streets, and martial halls alike. The infinite fighting monster, Seo Yun-hyun. Seo continued fighting relentlessly, fully aware that he had no talent, and that the path to the pinnacle he sought was infinitely distant. That was precisely why he had to fight constantly, pushing forward by crossing the boundaries between life and death. He believed that a man without talent had no choice but to go mad in order to break through the wall that stood in his way. If there is no talent, there must be madness. That was the only way for a dullard to catch up to a genius. And so, Seo scoured Seogyeong City and traveled across various regions of Yongguk, engaging in duels multiple times a day, regardless of whether the sects were orthodox or evil. Like that, 5 years passed. One day, a sudden explosion occurred in front of a house. Seo soared into the air and unleashed the 14th form of his mountain-breaking sword art, Q Mountain Heart Stream. He gathered energy from nature, energy as solid as a mountain, its heart as vast as the heavens. But even as he summoned it, Seo began to struggle. The form, a sword thread technique that could only be used upon reaching the pinnacle, put an enormous strain on his mind just by briefly manifesting it. But Seo knew, if he didn't do it this way, he'd never catch up. Suddenly, a black figure appeared behind him, launching a surprise attack. Seo turned and blocked it with his sword, but the force was overwhelming. Cracks spread through his blade. The strike sent him crashing into the ground, slamming him into a wall with such force that it blasted a hole straight through it. With just one hit, all of Seo's sword energy had been shattered. The figure laughed as he walked towards Seo and said, "Your reputation precedes you. I had quite high hopes, but you're still clumsy, young Master Seo, the infinite fighting monster." Stepping out from the smoke, the figure revealed himself. Seo's eyes widened. It was Director Kim, the one known as the greatest under heaven, Kim Young-hoon. Seo stood up, impressed. "You've gotten even stronger than last year," he said. And he was right. Director Kim had undergone a complete transformation in just 5 years. Looking down at the sword marks on his own hands, Seo couldn't help but reflect. What on earth have I done these past 5 years? His realm was still stuck at top tier. With a bitter expression, Seo admitted to himself that talent truly is something that makes a person feel miserable. Once things settled down, Seo asked, "What brings you here, Director Kim? Didn't we agree to meet every 2 years?" Director Kim replied, "After attaining the realm of 5 energies converging to the origin and visiting the great sects of Yangguo, I've come to realize something." Seo asked. Director Kim's answer was blunt. "There's no one left above me in all of Yongguk. Not a single person can even take one of my moves. That's why I'm planning to establish a new sect, or an organization of some sort, and I want to offer you a seat." But Seo immediately declined. "I'm comfortable with where I am now," he said. Looking at Director Kim, Seo thought to himself, he's already developed the martial lord's disease. Seo knew that if he accepted the offer, even in this life, he'd end up becoming a strategist or vice-sect leader, working himself to the bone. But with his limited talent, every minute, every second, was precious. Director Kim warned, "Once I establish the organization, it might be difficult to meet again." He tried persuading Seo, saying, "You could still stick around. Join me for some guidance duels maybe." But Seo declined again. "No matter what you offer," he said firmly, "I won't accept." Hearing this, Director Kim looked deeply saddened. It had been a good offer, genuine, well-meant, but Seo turned it down because he had already received plenty of Director Kim's teachings in his past life. What he needed now was not guidance, but real-world experience. In Seo's past life, Director Kim had once told him that after reaching the late stages of first rate, he should strive to experience as much real combat as possible. So, in this life, Seo chose to follow that advice, to merely observe Director Kim's saga from afar, while continuing his own endless journey in search of battle. And so, another 20 years passed. One rainy day, Director Kim arrived at the old house where they used to meet. He opened the creaky door and stepped inside, calling out to Seo, "You look pale." Seo was already there, waiting. Time had aged him. His hair had grayed. His face bore countless scars and cut marks. But above all, his expression was heavy, deeply sorrowful and worn. Because after all this time, Seo had finally come to accept the truth. His talent was a talent abandoned by the heavens. Seo sat cross-legged on the mat, his hand firmly gripping the hilt of a glowing blue sword. Despite his countless hours of relentless training, frustration clouded his expression. From across the room, Director Kim, with his long hair tied neatly at the back, looked at him and asked, "Have you still not broken through to the next realm?" Seo tightened his grip on the glowing sword, his eyes filled with determination. He acknowledged to himself that his understanding of sword chi had already far surpassed that of others in the league. Yet, despite his progress, he couldn't help but feel the sting of inadequacy. He still couldn't last beyond 3 moves against the high-rank masters. Director Kim placed a hand thoughtfully against his chin, his brows furrowing slightly. After a brief moment of contemplation, he muttered to himself, finding the situation unusual. "How strange," he thought. Director Kim observed Seo closely, noting the way he now moved as one with his sword, far more in tune than ever before. Yet, despite this progress, Seo still hadn't reached the peak realm. For someone with as much real combat experience as him, Director Kim thought, It should have been more than enough to break through. A faint, self-mocking smile curved Seo's lips as sweat trickled down his face. Inwardly, he acknowledged the bitter truth. This is my talent, he thought to himself. Blood trickled from Seo's nose as he forced a faint, bitter smile. In his heart, he acknowledged the cruel truth. He possessed a talent that the heavens themselves had cast aside. Seo's grip on his sword tightened. His expression strained as blood trickled from his nose. Half a day. That was his limit. If only he could sustain his sword chi effortlessly from dawn till dusk, without faltering, perhaps then he might finally catch a glimpse of the path forward. Seo's grip on his sword tightened, his expression strained as blood trickled from his nose. Half a day, that was his limit. If only he could sustain his sword chi effortlessly from dawn till dusk, without faltering, perhaps then he might finally catch a glimpse of the path forward. Director Kim handed Seo a thick, red-bound book, his tone filled with sincerity. He expressed his genuine hope for Seo's success, then added as he passed it over. Seo sat reading the red-bound book, his expression thoughtful. Director Kim explained that it contained insights he had gained from his recent battle against cultivators. By enduring their spells and dragging the fight out for as long as possible, he had managed to hold on and ultimately escape. Seo weighed the thick red-bound book in his hands. It was nearly as substantial as the main volume of the record of martial arts surpassing through cultivation and leaps, an evolved version of the record of transcending cultivation and exhausting martial arts. With a doubtful look, he questioned Director Kim, wondering if he had truly gained so much insight merely from successfully escaping. Standing in the doorway with lightning flashing behind him, Director Kim spoke with a grave tone. To him, cultivators were like natural disasters in human form. Escaping from such a force was no small feat. Naturally, the insight gained from surviving such an ordeal would be immense. Seo assured Director Kim that he would keep the book safe and pass it on to future generations. With sincerity in his voice, Director Kim responded, thanking him. Thank you, Yoon-hyun. Standing at the entrance of the building with his sword in hand, Director Kim looked out into the storm. He declared his intention to seek out the cultivators once more, his voice steady despite the danger ahead. With a faint, almost grim smile, he added that he hoped they would both be alive the next time they met. Before leaving, Director Kim turned to Seo, his gaze steady despite the falling rain. He offered a final piece of advice for reaching the peak realm. Every scene, every space he passed through and experienced, Seo needed to engrave them deeply into his mind, never letting those impressions fade. Seo's eyes widened in surprise as he processed Director Kim's words. Almost in disbelief, he echoed the thought aloud. Was he truly meant to imprint all the scenery around him into his mind? Director Kim explained further, likening the practice to how one instinctively takes note of the surrounding terrain during battle or sparring. Normally, a fighter would store the layout of their surroundings in their mind for tactical use. What he was suggesting, however, was to turn that skill into second nature, something Seo could do constantly, not just in the heat of combat. Seo's eyes widened in disbelief as he tried to grasp the enormity of the advice. Maintaining sword chi alone already felt like it was about to make his head explode, and now, on top of that, he was being told to keep his spatial awareness sharp and steady at all times. The thought left him wondering how anyone could possibly manage such a feat. A wave of pressure and strain built inside Seo's mind, the thought gnawing at him relentlessly. If this keeps up, will my head really explode? He wondered, feeling the weight of the task pressing against his very limits. Seo shook his head firmly. There had to be a reason why the strongest martial artist under heaven had entrusted him with such a task. It wasn't meaningless. There was purpose behind the challenge. From that day forward, Seo committed himself to a new discipline. He made a conscious effort to remember every space that came into view, training his mind to retain every detail. Over time, he began to recall exactly where everything was. Seo moved through the bustling streets, the vibrant scene unfolding around him. Every detail, the flow of the crowd, the arrangement of buildings, the colors and sounds. He committed to memory, sharpening his awareness with each passing moment. As Seo walked through the crowded streets, he paid attention even to the smallest details, the sound of footsteps against the tiled ground, the shuffle of shoes brushing past one another. Every movement and sound became a part of the mental map he was building. Passing through the dense forest, Seo noted the rustle of leaves and the way sunlight filtered through the canopy. Every sound, every flicker of movement in the greenery was etched into his memory, as part of his growing awareness of the world around him. Seo walked steadily through the forest, his breaths deep and measured, sword in hand. It had been 5 years since he began the relentless practice of maintaining both his sword chi and his spatial awareness. 5 years of unbroken discipline and focus. Seo swayed slightly, a wave of dizziness washing over him. Perceiving every fragment of spatial information that entered his field of vision was exhausting, far from an ordinary task, and certainly not an easy one. It demanded constant focus, pushing his mind to its limits. Seo realized his perception had grown sharper than ever before. It was no longer limited to visual information. Now, even the faintest sounds reached him with clarity. The rustling of leaves, the distant chirping of insects, the subtle crunch of footsteps. All of it became part of the world he was learning to perceive. A shadow of doubt crossed Seo's mind. Will I even be able to perform martial arts properly in this condition? He wondered. Yet he reminded himself that there were no more sects left to confront, at least for now. For nearly 3 decades, Seo journeyed across the entire Yan kingdom, challenging minor sects in sparring matches and, on occasion, testing his skills against the major ones. By now, there was hardly a sect in the kingdom that he hadn't visited, and now, Seo made his living by collecting bounties. His skills had brought him to the point where he was not only confronting outlaws, but also capturing dangerous bandits with ease. In his dizzy state, he found himself forced to battle enemies who attacked without restraint, using any means or methods to kill. The thought gnawed at him. Could he truly survive under such relentless conditions? One of the bandits spotted him and shouted, "Brother, it's him!" Another roared, "Found you, you bastard!" But Seo remained calm, gripping his sword tightly. Either way, he thought, this is the path I've chosen. The towering bandit leader stepped forward, his broad frame draped in a leopard-patterned robe, eyes locked on Seo with murderous intent. Resting a massive blade on his shoulder, he sneered and pointed his second sword toward his target. "You're dead now," he roared, his voice rumbling through the forest as the other bandits closed in behind him. Seo steadied his breathing, sword chi swirling around him despite the pounding in his head. "Even if I die," he thought, "this is the path I've chosen." Facing the armed men before him, his grip tightened. "Isn't this the path I must walk?" Blood sprayed through the air as screams of agony pierced the forest. The clash had begun, and the carnage was instant. 15 years had passed. Seo, now aged and bearing a weathered face marked by deep lines, gazed forward with a solemn expression. His gruff voice carried the weight of years as he quietly asked, "Did you survive, Director Kim?" His long hair tied neatly back and a deep scar etched across his face met Seo's gaze with a warm smile. In a confident yet light-hearted tone, he replied, "Yeah, this time too." It had been 45 years since Seo had returned to this life. As he calmly poured tea, his thoughts reflected on the changes within him. By now, his vision and hearing were sharper than ever, leaving no room for doubt. Even his sense of touch, taste, and smell had reached a state of refined perception, honed to near perfection over the decade. Seo's gaze fell upon the steaming cup of tea before him. Despite all the refinements his senses had achieved over the decades, he knew in his heart. But Seo's expression grew heavy, his eyes shadowed with the weight of regret. Even after all these years, he thought to himself, I still haven't become a master at the peak. Seo's eyes burned with fierce frustration, the weight of decades pressing down on him. The thought echoed relentlessly in his mind, rising into a silent roar. I still haven't. Director Kim sat across from Seo, a faint smirk playing on his lips as he sipped his drink. He explained that it seemed he had become wanted. Perhaps he had gotten a bit too famous among the cultivators. 2 of them, he continued, had even gone so far as to set a trap and lie in wait for him. Seo recounted his experience with a measured tone. He explained that he had barely managed to escape the ambush, though he did succeed in leaving a small cut on one of his attackers' cheeks. Looking toward Director Kim, he remarked that surely Kim must have gained valuable insight from this encounter as well. Director Kim scoffed at the idea of insight, dismissing it as nonsense. Placing his hand on the cup, he admitted that, even now, he still couldn't defeat a Judgment Stage Taoist. If he failed to escape in such a fight, he knew the outcome. He would end up as nothing more than a corpse lying on the ground. Director Kim tilted his head back slightly, his expression thoughtful, as he confessed what had been weighing on his mind lately. He admitted that the extreme state of the 5-path core he had reached might in fact be the very end of the martial path itself. Director Kim reflected aloud, wondering if even the martial arts record CEO had first given him, one that claimed martial arts could surpass cultivation, was perhaps flawed. He questioned if CEO had ever shared his thoughts, that no matter how strong or skilled one became, martial arts alone could never truly defeat cultivators. For some reason, CEO found himself seeing a reflection of his own past and struggles in Kim Young-hoon. CEO observed that Kim Young-hoon clearly possessed a talent blessed by the heavens. In contrast, he reflected bitterly, he himself had been born with a talent abandoned by the heavens. CEO reflected that he and Kim Young-hoon possessed talents that were complete opposites, one blessed by the heavens, the other abandoned by them. Yet, despite this stark contrast, he couldn't help but wonder, why does he look so much like me? CEO admitted his frustration at not knowing why he couldn't reach the peak realm. Director Kim considered this and noted that even after mimicking sword chi and adopting the perspective of the peak realm, CEO still couldn't attain it, and he still had no idea why. Under the quiet night sky, Director Kim suggested having a sparring match for old time's sake. CEO responded with a faint smile, saying it was the best thing he had heard in a long while. The moon hung high in the night sky, casting a gentle silver glow over the quiet forest below, as if silently bearing witness to the coming clash. The stillness of the night was shattered by a deafening clash, the air erupting with explosive force as their battle began, sending shockwaves rippling through the trees under the moonlit sky. CEO staggered back, clutching his side as pain surged through him. Gritting his teeth, he shouted in frustration, "Damn it! What the hell do you think the problem is?" Director Kim, standing with his sword in hand, admitted honestly that he didn't know the reason. By all rights, Seo should have become a peak master long ago. Blood dripped from Seo's mouth as he staggered, his voice sharp with confusion and urgency. "What do you mean? How strange, how bizarre. Why is this happening?" Director Kim wondered himself, struggling to comprehend. He said that even if Seo truly had no talent at all, this outcome still didn't make sense to him. Hearing that, Seo's eyes widened in shock and confusion. Director Kim placed a thoughtful hand on his chin, his gaze steady. Perhaps, what you're missing," he suggested, "is the right trigger." SEO repeated the word softly. "Trigger," Director Kim explained. "Something like desperation, or a driving force. Something that could push you past the limits of your talent by drawing out extreme focus." CEO's rage exploded as he shouted, his voice echoing with decades of frustration. "What kind of damn trigger are you even talking about? I've wielded a sword for over 50 years, my whole life." CEO's eyes burned with fury and desperation as he roared, "And now you're telling me, what kind of trigger do I still need to yearn for, and how much more desperately?" His voice trembled with raw emotion. "I've risked my life and struggled all my life just to escape mediocrity." CEO roared with fervent intensity, raising his sword high. "I've activated every meridian in my entire body. Now, even when I sleep, I hold my sword and release sword energy. Even in my dreams, I've reached the point where I process every bit of scenery and information I see." CEO collapsed to his knees, his voice breaking with anguish. "Then why? Why? Just why the hell? You're telling me the next realm won't reveal itself to me? Why? Why the hell not?" CEO lay sprawled on the ground, his sword cast aside, his breath ragged. Even he knew how pitiful it is for an old man, nearly 70, to resent the heavens. His voice cracked with anguish. Why? Just why? Even after a lifetime of chasing the sword, yearning for that elusive next realm, CEO's grasp remained empty. His fingers clawed into the dirt as he growled through clenched teeth. No matter how desperately he pursued it, he couldn't even begin to comprehend what that next realm truly was. Director Kim stood silently, sword in hand, gazing at CEO, who lay collapsed on the ground. His expression betrayed no words, only quiet contemplation, as the weight of CEO's struggle hung heavy in the night air. Director Kim turned away, his long hair swaying with the motion. With a swift, precise movement, his sword sliced through the air, sending sharp bursts of force into the trees ahead. The trunk split under the sheer power of his strikes, embers scattering in the night as the sound of tearing wood echoed through the forest. While sparring with him, Director Kim had devised a martial technique tailored to compensate for the CEO weaknesses. The markings of this new technique burned into the tree's surface, glowing faintly with heat and energy. "It may not be much comfort," Director Kim said calmly, "but I hope that learning this will bring you some peace of mind." SEO's eyes widened slightly as he read the glowing characters carved into the tree. "Mountain King's martial art and moon crossing step?" he muttered, recognition dawning in his voice. His grip tightened on his sword, a mixture of awe and reluctance filling his gaze. He looked toward the place where Director Kim had been standing moments ago and sighed bitterly. And now, you'll disappear again, just like that. 5 years later, the serene courtyard basked in the gentle warmth of autumn. The once vivid greens of the surrounding forest now transformed into a tapestry of gold, crimson, and amber. Seo tightened his grip on his sword, his weathered eyes filled with the weight of countless years. It had been 50 years since he had returned to this life, and now he could feel the end drawing near. He knew there was not much time left before death would finally claim him. Seo stood in the open courtyard, gazing upward as if speaking to someone beyond the mortal realm. "Brother Young-hoon, you died, didn't you?" he murmured, his voice heavy with sorrow. A deep sigh escaped him. "So this is the fate the heavens have chosen for both you and me." Seo's gaze softened as he reflected on the harsh truth of his journey. "With my talent," he thought, "no matter how hard I struggled, this was as far as I could go." His expression grew somber as he considered his fallen comrade. "And your talent too. Perhaps that was its limit." Walking away with a sword in hand, Seo spoke with a voice heavy with resignation. "No matter how much ordinary men like us struggle, we can't escape the fate the heavens have set for us." From behind, a voice cut through the air in sharp defiance. "What kind of nonsense are you spouting, Seo Yun-hyun?" It was Director Kim. Blood streamed down Director Kim's face as he staggered forward, desperation blazing in his eyes. "Wait!" he cried out, his voice hoarse and trembling. A violent cough shook his body, forcing blood from his lips. Seo's eyes widened in alarm as he caught sight of Director Kim's grave injuries. "Your condition is serious," he exclaimed urgently. Without hesitation he added, "I need to get my medical tools from home." But suddenly something grabbed Seo from behind. His expression tightened in alarm. His eyes widened, sensing something unexpected. In an instant, Seo was hurled into the air by Director Kim, and just as they fly into the sky, the ground erupted in a violent explosion of dirt and debris, the shockwave echoing across the courtyard. As they were hurled through the air, Seo's eyes widened in shock. "What?" he thought in disbelief. His gaze locked on Director Kim, and a chilling realization struck him. Weren't both of his arms cut off? Director Kim shouted over the rushing wind, his voice filled with urgency. "Look, Yoon-hyun, that crazy cultivator bastard is chasing after us." A bitter laugh escaped him despite the danger. "This is the price I paid for blasting off one of the judgment stage cultivator's arms." Blood streamed down Director Kim's face as he let out a wild, almost manic laugh. He roared, his eyes burned with a fierce sense of accomplishment. "I dealt meaningful damage to a judgment stage cultivator." Director Kim's bloodshot eyes burned with a wild, unrestrained fervor. "I saw with my own eyes the realm beyond the five-path core," he declared, his voice trembling with exhilaration. "The one no martial artist can reach." His expression twisted into manic laughter. "I saw it with my own eyes." Seo's eyes widened in shock, his face frozen in disbelief as he looked on, utterly stunned by what he had just heard. Director Kim, bloodied and ragged, pointed upward with a crazed gleam in his eyes. Above him, a glowing sphere of energy pulsed and crackled with immense power. He told Seo to look, saying that he had risked his life and burned away his very life force to reach this point. As Seo's eyes widened in shock, his expression a mix of disbelief and awe. His voice trembled as he muttered, "That's enhanced ki?" Director Kim boasted with pride, telling Seo that he had been able to shatter a core formation cultivator's arm thanks to this. The brilliant blue sphere surged with power, radiating a force that seemed capable of tearing through anything in its path. Then, Director Kim launched that enhanced chi attack toward Seo's house. Suddenly, a massive explosion tore through the buildings, splintering wood and shattering structures in an instant. Debris rained down as the force of the blast sent shockwaves rippling through the area, reducing everything in its path to chaos and ruin. Director Kim laughed and gestured toward the massive cloud of smoke and debris rising in the distance. He told Seo to watch, saying, "This is the result of my life's work, training in martial arts." Seo's eyes widened in shock as his house was destroyed. He gazed at the burning wreckage, his heart heavy with despair. For 50 years, he had invested every coin he earned, pouring not just his wealth, but his boundless fighting spirit into building that house. Now, it lay in ruins before his eyes. Bloodied but grinning wildly, Director Kim let out a manic laugh. His eyes burned with fierce determination as he told Seo that he had run far and wide to show him this, because he had decided to leave his will to him. In that moment, Seo's mind went blank as a surge of rage welled up inside him, but he forced himself to calm down, steadying his breath, and focused on watching Director Kim's martial arts performance. The spot where a 3-story building once stood had been obliterated, exploding with such force that it vanished without leaving a single trace behind. Flames and smoke engulfed the remains of the house, and the thought crossed his mind. It was a relief he hadn't kept any servants there, otherwise hundreds of lives would have been lost in that single devastating attack. Amid the smoldering ruins, faint blade marks could be seen etched into the few remaining structures. It became clear the ball of enhanced chi from earlier had been a concentrated mass of thousands of blade energies unleashed at once. The sheer force left Seo stunned. He couldn't believe what unbelievable power he had just witnessed. It was stronger than any martial arts technique Director Kim had ever shown him before. Blood streaming down Director Kim's face, he explained with a strained voice, "This is how I was able to shatter a core formation cultivator's arm. Before, I had to rely on ambushes or assassinations just to take down chi building stage cultivators, but now I can face them head on." However, after that, he was badly injured, and after showing Seo his newly developed martial arts skill, he could hardly use any chi to sustain both of them in the air. They crashed into the ground with a thunderous impact, sending shockwaves rippling through the earth. Debris and shattered stone erupted into the air, the force of the fall scattering leaves and shaking the trees around them. Dust and debris slowly settled over the shattered ground. Fragments of wood and stone scattered in all directions. The aftermath of the impact hung in the air, quiet except for the faint sound of falling rubble. Lying bloodied on the ground, Director Kim told Seo not to forget these techniques. "They are my life's realizations. Pass my martial arts on to future generations," he said weakly. Kneeling beside him, Seo nodded and told him to stop talking. His life was at stake here. But before he could do anything, a figure perched high on a branch amidst the crimson foliage looked down with a cold, confident gaze. "Found you, ultimate martial spirit," the stranger said. "That's quite a terrible spot to run to." Seeing him, Seo looked up sharply, tension tightening his grip as the words sank in. Cultivator looked down with a stern expression and told Seo, "That man is a criminal who has committed unspeakable crimes against cultivators. Leave him here." Seo glanced back with a wary expression and asked the cultivator if he was here to punish him. The cultivator looked down at Seo and asked if Director Kim was his acquaintance. Seo thought carefully and realized that he could not fight this cultivator. Without hesitation, he hoisted the injured Director Kim onto his back and bolted forward, his feet pounding against the ground as he dashed away at full speed. Watching Seo flee with the injured Kim, the figure in blue clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Pointless. Did you not hear about them from the ultimate martial spirit?" The cultivator laughed darkly, a grin spreading across his face as he stood balanced on the branch, purple energy swirling menacingly around him. "I'll think of it as entertainment," he said, telling Seo to run as best he could. Seo's eyes widened in shock as he glanced over his shoulder, his breath quickening. "That's..." he murmured, a mix of fear and recognition flashing across his face. Purple miasma poured from the figure in blue as he stood on the branch, talismans fluttering in the air. Below, an army of corpses emerged, their eyes glowing and mouths twisted in grotesque snarls. Seo sprinted desperately across the open field, the injured Director Kim still on his back, gritting his teeth as he realized he was too old for this. Behind him, the undead horde let out chilling screams, closing the distance, their relentless pursuit echoing through the air. As Seo ran, he panted heavily between words, asking Director Kim, "Ultimate martial spirit? Did the cultivators give you that name? How unique." Between heavy breaths, Seo spoke with disbelief and frustration. The ultimate martial spirit and the infinite fighting spirit, two spirits being chased by the Jiangshi. How strange is that? His voice grew urgent as he ran. Glancing at the injured director, Kim slumped on his back. He told him to stay awake. Behind them, the relentless Jiangshi closed in, their pounding footsteps echoing through the field. One of the Jiangshi lunged forward with a feral expression, its pale eyes wide and unblinking. It let out a blood-curdling scream as its clawed hands reached out to snatch its prey. With a fierce glare, Seo swung his arm in a wide arc, striking the lunging Jiangshi with enough force to send blood spraying through the air. His grip tightened on the injured man's body as he fought to keep moving forward. Seo's powerful kick sent the Jiangshi hurtling backward, crashing into several of its kin. Blood sprayed as the undead tumbled to the ground in a chaotic heap, momentarily halting their advance. SEO dashed through the forest with the injured Director Kim slung over his back, grumbling between heavy breaths. "I should be the one running with you on my back," he complained. Struggling under the weight, he added in frustration, "I'm gonna die from suffocation. Why did you have to get your arms cut off?" Meanwhile, the Zhongshi refused to give up, their guttural screams echoing through the autumn forest as they continued the relentless chase. Gritting his teeth, Seo pushed through the burning in his lungs and kept running, each heavy step pounding against the leaf-strewn path. Morning turned to night, and night gave way to morning, over and over again. The days blurred together, leaving him unsure of how many times the sun had risen and fallen as he kept running with the Zhongshi close behind. Seo's breath came in ragged gasps, each exhale a desperate struggle as sweat dripped down his face. His lungs burned, yet he forced himself to keep going. Reaching the edge of a towering cliff, Seo looked down with a grimace, clutching the injured Director Kim tightly on his back. It's so high up, while the relentless Zhongshi clambered up the rock face in pursuit. Hovering in the night sky, the cultivator gazed down at the scene, his tone calm yet tinged with intrigue. He looked at Seo surrounded by snarling Zhongshi, unable to believe that a mere civilian had managed to withstand them for 3 days and nights. However, now he cannot run anymore. It's all so futile to do so. "The ultimate martial spirit is already dead," the cultivator declared coldly. SEO staggered forward with the injured Director Kim still slung over his back, his breath ragged and heavy. "I already know," he told the cultivator. "After all, I am a physician." Cultivator fixed his gaze on Seo, his expression calm yet probing. He asked Seo why he was running. He was only interested in the ultimate martial spirit and didn't care about Seo. He could have just abandoned the corpse and escaped. "You don't have to risk your life for a dead man," he added. Seo lowered his head, a faint smirk curling on his lips. A low, unsettling chuckle escaped him, growing steadier and darker with each breath. Seeing him like that, the cultivator looked at Seo with suspicion and curiosity, asking the reason for his laughter. Seo smiled, his hands tightening around the hilt of his sword as he slowly began to draw the blade. The Severing Mountain Sword, the Dragon Vein Chi method, the Mountain Lord martial arts, and the Transcending Peak steps. He reflected inwardly, a faint smirk tugging at his lips, thinking, "I was able to reach this point despite being void of talent." He looked at the dead body of Director Kim and thanked him for his teachings. "He's someone from my hometown, as well as my martial mentor." So, with fierce determination burning in his eyes, Seo thrust his blade forward, his voice thundering through the night. "If you want to take my master's head, you'll have to take mine first." The cultivator stood in silence, his expression unreadable, half his face cloaked in shadow as his piercing gaze locked forward. A horde of grotesque undead creatures shambled toward them, their pale faces twisted with hunger as a sinister purple aura swirled behind. The cultivator remarked to Seo, "No one knows to fear the cultivators. Is it because you just don't know any better? Or do you have no fear because you are so old?" He broke one of the undead's hands and told Seo, "I'll show you. Cultivators have the power to make you feel pain worse than death." 2 enormous spectral hands shot forward from the swirling energy, passing by Seo. His eyes widened in shock, his body tensing as something blurred past him at incredible speed, leaving him momentarily frozen in place. Seo's sharp gaze followed the blur, realization dawning in his eyes. He wasn't the target. Seo quickly turned back and saw those hands attach themselves to Director Kim's body. His eyes widened in horror as he realized what the cultivator intended to do. The cultivator looked at Seo with a cold, piercing stare. "I'll make you pay the price for looking down on a cultivator," he said. Seo's face twisted with rage, his teeth clenched and eyes blazing as he shouted, "You evil bastard!" With those undead hands attached to Director Kim's body, he became part of the cultivator's undead army. With a menacing glare, the cultivator commanded, "Ultimate martial spirit, kill your own disciple." The possessed Director Kim threw his head back and let out a monstrous roar, his jagged teeth bared as an inhuman sound tore from his throat. Wreathed in a sinister purple aura, he swung his weapon with devastating force toward Seo, who braced himself with his sword, his expression tense and unyielding. Seo glared up at Cultivator hovering above, his voice filled with fury as he demanded, "How dare you defile A dead man's legacy like this. The cultivator looked down at Seo with a calm yet condescending smile, clearly enjoying the anger etched across Seo's face. Meanwhile, Director Kim's body, radiating that same sinister purple aura, charged at Seo and clashed violently with him, their blades ringing out in the cold air. Seo's thoughts remained steady despite the onslaught. Thankfully, his opponent couldn't use martial arts. Instead, Kim attacked with nothing but the raw, overwhelming strength that the cultivator's power had surged into him, each strike driven purely by brute force rather than technique. Blade crashed against blade with crushing force, the impact reverberating through the air. Purple energy surged around Director Kim, amplifying every strike. But the sheer force and speed were so great that Seo thought grimly, his arms straining under the pressure. It's hard for my old body to withstand this. Gritting his teeth, his eyes blazing with determination, Seo struggled against the crushing weight of the descending blade. Gripping his sword tightly, he felt the dishonor pressing on him. It was already an incredible disgrace to point his blade at Kim Young-hoon, especially when he was already dead. Seo's lips tightened as he spoke in a solemn voice, apologizing. But deep inside, his resolve hardened. If there was nothing else he could do, then he would end it as quickly as possible. Shifting his stance, his grip firm on the hilt, a surge of violet energy spiraled around Seo. His expression was calm, yet resolute, as he invoked his technique. Severing Mountain Sword, 21st form, Heavenly Lake. He remembered that the 21st form of the Severing Mountain Sword was known as Heavenly Lake, a technique as majestic and vast as its name implied. When Director Kim had taught him this technique, Seo had asked, "All of the other forms are named after some mountain, peak, or valley. So why is the 21st form named after a lake?" Since Young-hoon Hyung had created it for him in his past life, perhaps he would have an answer. Lying on the grass back then, Director Kim had gazed up at the sky and told Seo, "Heavenly Lake. It reminds me of the heavenly lake atop Mount Baekdu." Curious, Seo had asked, "Mount Baekdu?" Director Kim had laughed and nodded, telling Seo that this world had a lake similar to Mount Baekdu's. Or maybe the name had been created by people from Korea, like them. A heavenly lake, its crystal clear surface mirroring the boundless blue sky above. Surrounded by towering, rugged cliffs, the tranquil waters stretched endlessly, embodying serene beauty. It was a lake so pure and still that it seemed to reflect the very sky itself. Now Seo gazed at his glowing blade, his voice calm yet resolute. The heavenly lake holds the view of the skies within its surface, but its nature remains unchanged. In his mind, he reflected on the teachings of the Severing Mountain Sword. The sky symbolized the martial artist he dueled with, and the lake, which encompasses the sky's view, referred to his single strike. Before him, Director Kim lunged with ferocity, their blades moments away from clashing. With a thunderous burst of energy, the strike connected, sending a violent shockwave rippling outward. Director Kim's eyes went wide in shock and agony as his body was engulfed in the overwhelming force, his scream tearing through the air while debris scattered in all directions. Seo's gaze was sharp, his grip steady on the hilt of his glowing sword, as he recalled the essence of his technique. The heavenly lake of the Severing Mountain absorbs all the energy flowing in the opponent's veins into my sword energy for a single moment, and in that instant it launches the enemy away while their energy becomes trapped within my blade. Purple energy swirled and crackled along his sword. It's a move I can use because I'm a first-rate physician and a master at understanding the 8 chi veins, he thought, feeling the flow of power align perfectly with his strike. This was no ordinary technique. It's a move only I can perform, because this martial art was created specifically for me. Seo knew that if Young-hoon Hyung's corpse remained intact, it could continue to be used as a Zhangshi. That was why he couldn't allow a single piece of him to remain for that evil cultivator to exploit. His fingers tightened around the hilt as blue energy churned violently within the sheath. He would use that churning power to combine all of the Severing Mountain Sword's forms into a single attack. Seo surged forward, his movements sharp and precise as his blade carved through the air, transcending peaks. With a burst of power, he channeled the form's essence, his strike carrying the force and grandeur of mountains rising beyond the clouds. His blade cleaved through the air in a brilliant arc of light, tearing into his opponent. The powerful slash cut cleanly through Director Kim's body, the momentum carrying the attack past him as the sky split with its radiance. Seo unleashed a relentless sequence of strikes, each flowing seamlessly into the next. Second form, Entering Mountain. Third form, Ascending Vein. Fourth form, Flowing Ridge. Fifth form, Bouldered Cliff. Sixth form, Strange Stone. His blade carved through the battlefield, each form merging into the next with flawless precision. The ground split and shattered under the force, fragments of rock erupting into the air as arcs of swordlight tore across the terrain. Director Kim let out a blood-curdling scream as countless deep gashes tore across his body in a crisscross pattern. Blood sprayed in every direction, his form trembling violently under the unrelenting assault of Seo's devastating strikes. Seo's eyes burned with fierce determination, his expression twisted with resolve. I'll cut him to pieces, so the cultivators can never defile his legacy further by turning his corpse into their puppet. Seeing this, the cultivator's face twisted with fury, his eyes blazing as he thrust his hand forward, purple-blue energy surging from his palm. "You insect!" he roared, his voice echoing like a thunderclap. As he poured that purple-blue energy into Director Kim's body, it transformed into a monstrous figure that let out a guttural, ear-splitting roar. Its deformed, muscle-bound frame trembled with rage, black tattered wings flaring menacingly from its back as dark energy rippled around it. From below, Seo stood unfazed, his white hair whipping in the turbulent air, staring up at the beast without a hint of fear. Seo's expression hardened, beads of sweat running down his weathered face as he quickly assessed the situation. He couldn't believe the cultivator had boosted him with even more power and speed. His sharp eyes locked on the enemy's movements. There was no time to hesitate. He needed to dodge, fast. But Seo's initial instinct to dodge wavered, his thoughts shifting in an instant. No, what use is there in dodging? He realized grimly, his eyes locked onto the monstrous foe barreling toward him. My life will end soon. I'm already as good as dead. A flicker of resolve lit in his gaze. I will use this moment. With a firm step, Seo's foot slammed into the ground, cracks splintering outward as dust and debris swirled around him. His resolve burned unwaveringly in his heart. To ensure that his master would never again be defiled, he vowed, each movement fueled by unyielding determination. With a fierce battle cry, Seo hurled himself downward like a spear, spiraling through the air with unstoppable momentum. The wind howled around him, the sheer force of his descent tearing through the sky. Burn it all! He roared in his heart and aloud, channeling every ounce of his remaining strength into the final, all-consuming strike. The monstrous figure threw back its head and let out a thunderous roar, veins bulging as raw power surged through its massive frame. Muscles tightened like steel cables, and with a savage lunge, it thrust its arm upward toward the descending Seo. Seo's thoughts raced as he plunged toward his target. I will die, he acknowledged grimly, the truth pressing heavily against his mind. But almost instantly, defiance flared in his eyes. No, I can't die yet. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding as he forced his body to endure. Just a little more, he urged himself, every muscle straining to push beyond his limits. He gritted his teeth, the metallic tang of blood seeping into his mouth as his senses sharpened to a razor's edge. He could feel everything, the air around him, the noises echoing in the distance, the faint scents carried by the wind. He noted the subtle shifts in humidity and temperature, every detail registering in his mind. Even the warm blood on the tip of his tongue was unmistakable, grounding him in the brutal reality of the moment. His head throbbed violently, every heartbeat sending a pulse of agony through his skull. The pressure mounted to an unbearable peak, his brain feeling as if it might explode. But instead of resisting, his eyes burned with feral resolve. Then let it explode! He vowed, ready to sacrifice everything for this final moment. Seo's eyes blazed with a wild, unrelenting fire as he pushed his body beyond its limits. More! More! He demanded of himself, the raw energy surging through him threatening to consume his very mind. With a primal roar, he swung his blade downward, his voice echoing like thunder. Until my brain burns to a crisp. He unleashed every last shred of strength in a single devastating strike. A deafening crack split the air as a surge of crimson energy erupted outward, fracturing the space around him like shattered glass. The red light pulsed violently, radiating raw, destructive power that tore through everything in its path. Seo's eyes widened, his pupils constricting as shock and realization struck him all at once. His breath caught in his throat, his face frozen in raw disbelief, as if witnessing the impossible. His skull felt on the verge of bursting from the unbearable pressure, his mind teetering on the edge of collapse. Yet instead of yielding to the crushing strain of staking his life, something within him broke past that limit, surpassing an unseen threshold he hadn't even known existed. His body felt strangely light as he drifted forward, sword in hand, through an unfamiliar void. Confusion gripped his thoughts. What's going on? Have I become delusional? He wondered, unsure if this was reality or something beyond it. Seo's eyes flew wide open, his pupils trembling as a jolt of realization surged through him. This is, he thought, caught between awe and disbelief, as if he had stepped into a truth far beyond his understanding. He charged forward, expression fierce and unyielding, sword poised to strike. He could now see the moment of his enemy's attack. He could feel it. With a thunderous impact, Seo's strike met the towering Director Kim head-on. The creature's massive, clawed foot slammed into the ground, cracking the earth, while its grotesque, sinewed frame twisted to overpower him. Seo drove forward with all his might, the clash shaking the battlefield as their combined force tore through the air. Beneath the dark, swirling sky, Seo stood firm, his tattered robes fluttering in the wind. Gripping his sword with unwavering resolve, he let its blade gleam with a brilliant arc of blue light that cut through the gloom. His weathered gaze was steady, carrying the weight of countless battles and the unyielding will to see this one through. Seo's blade pierced the clouds above, its edge trailing a sharp arc of blue light that split the sky. With a single decisive slash, his blade tore through the monstrous foe's massive frame. Blood erupted in a violent spray as the creature's agonized roar echoed through the air, its body convulsing from the devastating blow. Seo's eyes widened, a sharp glint of realization flashing within them. Could this be? The thought struck like a thunderclap. Blood still gushed from the deep wound carved across Director Kim's chest, yet Kim's lips curved upward in a faint, almost serene smile. Seo's eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't believe Kim Young-hoon was smiling. A talent blessed by the heavens and a talent forsaken by the heavens. Two extremes standing on opposite ends. Yet despite their differences, there was a single thread binding them. Both had spent their lives struggling to break free from the fate the heavens had given them, refusing to surrender to destiny's grip. Seo gripped his sword as a blinding red light swallowed the battlefield, casting everything into stark silhouettes. Flesh tore apart with each strike, the spray of blood bursting through the crimson haze. The two figures clashed in a violent crescendo, locked in a deadly dance against the backdrop of searing scarlet. Seo realized there was no such thing as a genius or a dunce. There were only two men who had fought their entire lives against the fates imposed upon them, one now lying dead, the other standing at the brink of death. With a defiant grin, Director Kim's eyes gleamed with challenge as he asked Seo if he was going to stop there. But Seo knew this was not the end. He wasn't going to stop. He leapt high into the air, his cloak billowing as the tip of his sword gleamed under the moonlight. Channeling all his strength, he unleashed the 15th form, layered mountain, an overwhelming slash that descended like a tempest. The ground below erupted violently on impact, shock waves tearing through the earth as dust and debris exploded outward in a roaring cascade. As the dust swirled violently in the aftermath, a cold voice echoed through the chaos. This is the end. The cultivator's face contorted with rage, veins bulging across his temple as he threw his head back and roared, eyes blazing with unrestrained fury. Seo's voice was cold and certain as he hurled his foe through the air. Now, even a cultivator won't be able to identify Director Kim's corpse any longer. The body tumbled weightlessly, fragments of stone falling alongside it into the dark abyss below. With his eyes gently closed and a faint, serene smile on his face, Seo spoke softly, his voice carrying both reverence and sorrow in his final prayer, that his martial arts master could rest in peace. The words lingered like a blessing, as if sending off an old friend on their last journey. And so, he finally reached the level of martial arts he had long yearned for, a peak he had chased through years of relentless effort. With that, he brought an end to a life defined by unending struggles and ceaseless battles. That marked the end of his fourth regression, a chapter closed in the long cycle of lives he had endured. Seo lay on the grass, staring at his hand in disbelief. He realized that he had regressed once more. Memories of his past life began to surface. He remembered how, in that life, he had fought relentlessly until the very end. Clenching his fist tightly, he recalled the moment with pride. He had finally achieved what he had been striving for. With overwhelming emotion, he clenched his fist and shouted to the sky. After countless struggles, he had finally done it. He had reached the peak of martial arts. At last, he had attained the strength and mastery he had longed for his entire life. Just as he was recalling the moment, John came running angrily, shouting at Seo, "What the hell are you talking about?" His face twisted with rage as he accused, "It's your fault, you crazy bastard." Meanwhile, Seo remained calm, barely reacting to the outburst. A sharp glint flashed in his eyes as a confident smile formed on his face. With certainty, he murmured to himself, "I see it." The furious Jian swung his hand down in an attempt to strike, but Seo calmly tilted his body and dodged with ease. Shocked and angry, the man shouted, "You're dodging?" With his eyes closed and a calm expression, Seo thought to himself that he could still clearly sense everything. He knew exactly where John Myung-hoon's next strike would land. Seo moved smoothly, avoiding each attack with ease. He reflected that before, he could dodge strikes even with his eyes closed, but that was only because he predicted the trajectory of his opponent's moves. That ability came from decades of martial arts experience. Seo realized that this time was different. It wasn't just prediction based on experience. It felt more like true foresight, as if he could clearly see his opponent's next move before it even happened. He realized the truth. No matter how many first-rate martial artists there were, none could ever defeat someone who had reached the peak level. Such masters could clearly see the trajectory and direction of attacks from those weaker than them. Against that kind of power, how could an ordinary martial artist ever hope to stand a chance? His eyes glowed with a sharp blue light as he focused intensely. With determination burning inside him, he thought to himself, "This time, I realize something new. I can instinctively sense it." The glowing blue lines revealed his opponent's openings and showed him the best possible trajectories to strike with. He noticed the difference in his vision. Red lines revealed the paths of his opponent's attacks, while blue lines guided him toward the most optimal counterattacks. He thought to himself that the gap between John Myung-hoon and him was simply too vast. That overwhelming difference was the reason he could see so many openings in his opponent's moves. Seo's eyes widened in surprise as blood trickled from his nose. Shocked, he couldn't understand what had just happened. Clutching his head in pain, Seo gritted his teeth as blood ran down his face. "Damn, it hurts. It feels like my brain is on fire." The realization struck him. Could this vision be overloading his brain? Breathing heavily with rage, John Myung-hoon swung his fist at Seo while shouting, "You bastard! You nearly got us all killed and now you dare to dodge my attacks?" In an instant, Seo struck back with precision. John's eyes rolled back as his head snapped to the side, sweat flying off his face from the sharp impact. He collapsed to the ground, knocked out cold. Seo stood over him calmly, while a group of colleagues rushed over in shock, shouting, "Section Chief John!" Seo clutched his head, still feeling the strain from the overwhelming vision. One of his colleagues approached with concern and asked, "Deputy Manager Seo, is he all right?" Seo wiped the blood from his nose and let out a deep breath. To think it had hurt this much after using it for such a short time, he thought. What could be the problem? After the fight, Seo took a moment to steady himself and then reassured his co-workers. Once he had calmed them down, the tense atmosphere began to ease. He led them to a cave and started a fire to keep them safe. After cooking some fruits for them to eat, he watched as they slowly drifted off to sleep, finally able to rest. Inside the cave, his co-workers lay scattered around the warm fire, fast asleep. The crackling flames filled the silence as they found a moment of peace after the chaos. While they slept, Seo stood outside under the night sky, practicing with a wooden stick. His movements were sharp and precise, slicing through the air as leaves fluttered around him. With a swift strike of his stick, Seo cleanly split a falling leaf in two, showcasing the sharp precision of his movements. He looked at the branch in his hand with a faint smile. "Without using a single bit of ki, I managed to slice a leaf clean in half. With just this dull branch," he thought, realizing the precision of his control. Seo reflected on his ability. The vision of martial peak seemed to predict his opponent's moves, and his brain interpreted them, displaying red and blue lines before his eyes. Seo analyzed calmly. If he used this vision, he could read all of his opponent's movements and strike at their weaknesses with the most optimal counter. At last, Seo understood. So this is why Director Kim called it the memory of all five senses. It's actually a replication of a peak martial artist's vision. His eyes glowed with sharp blue light as he realized the truth. Director Kim had been forcing him to enhance all five senses and manually calculate his opponent's trajectories. As Seo held the branch, countless blue lines spread out before his eyes, mapping every possible path. The vision of martial peak is truly incredible, he thought in awe. Seo stood firm in the forest clearing, leaves swirling wildly around him. With the branch in his hand and a calm yet sharp gaze, he radiated quiet confidence, fully immersed in the power of his newly realized vision. Slowly, He closed his eyes, shutting out the world around him. In the darkness behind his eyelids, memories of battles and warriors resurfaced vividly, as if guiding him toward deeper understanding. In his mind's eye, Seo saw countless warriors in green robes charging forward with swords, axes, and spears, each strike fierce and deadly. Their movements overlapped like echoes of battle, as though he were reliving the experiences of countless martial artists at once. Seo moved with fluid precision, weaving through the storm of phantom warriors. Each swing of his branch struck perfectly, guided by visions of countless martial techniques, as if he were fighting alongside generations of masters within a single moment. In his vision, the warriors shouted fiercely, their blades flashing as they attacked from every direction. The scene was chaotic and relentless, a storm of martial fury pressing down on him all at once. As dawn broke, the forest bathed in the warm glow of sunrise. Amid the quiet rustle of leaves, Seo exhaled heavily, his breath ragged from the intense training and visions he had endured throughout the night. Drenched in sweat, he let out a relieved smile. "Now," he muttered, exhaustion mixing with determination after a night of relentless training. Standing tall with the branch still in hand, Seo looked out at the morning light with unwavering confidence. "I've finally reached the proper martial peak," he declared to himself, his heart pounding with triumph. Suddenly, Seo clutched his head in agony, gritting his teeth. His brain felt like it was about to fry to a crisp, the strain of his newfound power overwhelming him. But after he found 8 yellow bamboo roots nearby and performed the Dragon Vein Chi method, he managed to stabilize himself. Now, he could maintain the vision for 3 whole hours. Seo looked down at the bamboo roots and thought to himself, "Now that I've reached this level of prowess, I no longer need to sell these yellow bamboo roots. I can resolve financial issues with my own abilities." As for the leftovers, carrying the remaining roots back to the cave, he glanced at Director Kim, who was snoring loudly in his orange jacket. Seo set the roots beside him. Director Kim slept soundly, unaware of the intense training Seo had just undergone outside. Seo sat quietly in the cave, deep in thought. In my memory are 6 volumes of Director Kim's research, as well as his final teachings before he died, he reflected, feeling the weight of the knowledge entrusted to him. Looking at the man sleeping peacefully, Seo thought, if I pass this knowledge to him, this life's Director Kim will surely surpass the previous one. Now that I've reached the martial peak, the teachings I can receive from him will far exceed what I gained in my past life. Leaving the leftover roots beside Director Kim, Seo stepped out of the cave once more. He still had no clue how to reach the next stage, but unlike his co-workers, he knew there was only one option for an idiot like him: train endlessly. To continuously maintain a peak master's vision and allow his brain to adapt to it, that was his path. Seo's eyes narrowed with determination. My first goal in this life is to resolve the burning pain I suffer when using this vision. Seo envisioned his ultimate goal, to finally attain the level of the 3 flowers gathering at the summit. Glowing blue lotuses shimmered in his mind's eye, symbolizing the pinnacle of mastery he longed to reach. Seo walked out of the cave with firm steps, his fists clenched in resolve. I will reach what is known as the pinnacle of martial peak, the 3 flowers gathering at the summit. Morning arrived, sunlight spilling over the mountains and forest, marking the beginning of a new day filled with determination and resolve. The enormous fox, known as the master of the forest, appeared once more in this life. As Seo knelt and stretched out his arm toward the beast, curiosity filled his heart. His sharp blue eyes gleamed with anticipation as he wondered, will I see red lines with this fox as well? However, to his surprise, the fox's body glowed with a fierce red aura as waves of pressure rippled through the air. There was no blue. Seo's eyes widened in shock as his vision was overwhelmed. It's red everywhere. The fox's bloody jaws snapped open, its fangs dripping with menace. Seo froze in terror, his thoughts trembling. He realized he couldn't win. Staggering back, blood splattering around him, he clenched his teeth in confusion. Just what is this? He thought desperately. How could the entire area in my vision be filled with red? A few days later, under the night sky, cultivators descended from the heavens. When they arrived, Seo was once again left in shock. The cultivators floated high above, their overwhelming presence distorting everything around them. Seo's vision flared, his heart racing in disbelief. Again, it was all red. Sweat dripped down his face as he stared in horror. He realized the difference between a martial artist and a cultivator. There was no opening, no chance of victory. Even a martial peak master would struggle against the weakest of cultivators, those only at the first star of the chi refining stage. The day after the cultivators took his co-workers, Seo turned to Seo Hueol, the Sea Dragon King, and asked a question. With a respectful gesture, Seo bowed slightly and said, "A humble mortal asks the great Sea Dragon King a question." The Sea Dragon King tilted his head with a faint smile and replied, "What is it?" Seo explained everything he had witnessed and then asked about the mysterious red sphere the cultivators carried. The Sea Dragon King chuckled softly. "Cultivators possess a special kind of consciousness," he said. "It is sometimes called divine consciousness. While a mortal's consciousness does not extend past the brain, a cultivator's consciousness spreads outward, engulfing the surrounding area. I too, as a spiritual creature, possess this ability." After explaining, the Sea Dragon King turned to leave. Seo bowed respectfully and thanked him. Meanwhile, Director Kim watched in confusion. Since the conversation was spoken in the language of Yangguo, Director Kim couldn't understand a single word. Shortly after Seo Hueol departed, the hunchbacked old man appeared once more, controlling a puppet at his side. This time he came to take Manager Kim away. Without warning, the old man hurled Seo and Director Kim into a swirling spatial rift, dragging them into the unknown. The two were suddenly plunged into deep waters, their bodies sinking helplessly after being cast through the rift. Seo struggled underwater, bubbles escaping his mouth as his eyes widened in shock. Panic surged through him. He pulled himself toward the surface, his hand gripping wet sand as he dragged himself ashore, frustration clear in his voice. "It was on top of the trees last time. Now it's in water." Seo stood on the shore, wringing the water from his clothes, while Director Kim lay exhausted on the sand. Gasping for breath, Director Kim finally woke, panic in his eyes, and asked Seo where they were. Seo, still calm despite the situation, answered firmly, "Somewhere completely different." He buttoned up his damp shirt while scanning the surroundings. "Judging by the landscape, this is the Chicken Head Lake of Yangguo. Changho City should be nearby," he thought. Director Kim let out a frustrated sigh and asked, "Seo, what should we do now?" Seo glanced around the empty shore and replied, "If there were people nearby, we could ask for directions." He pointed across the shimmering water. There appeared to be some buildings across the lake. Director Kim squinted, then nodded quickly. Seo dove into the lake without hesitation, telling him, "I know how to swim. I'll go there and get us some clothes and food." Kim Young-hoon panicked, calling out, "Seo, be careful!" As Seo swam across the lake, he muttered in frustration, "For fuck's sake, what did we squeeze the water out of our clothes for then?" Still, his thoughts sharpened. "If my memories serve me correctly, that building is a bandit's den. I wiped them out in my previous life." He recalled his past encounter. Their leader had been in the late stages of first rate, the vice leader in the middle stage of first rate, and the rest were just second and third rate small fry. Of course they had numbers, so he had used poison on his blade to take them out. Suddenly, one of the bandits turned his head, narrowing his eyes. A moment later, his expression shifted to shock as he noticed someone approaching. Seo emerged from the water, droplets streaming down his clothes as he walked toward the shore. The bandits burst into laughter. "Who's this fool? Doesn't even know where he just swam to?" One sneered. "Get lost if you don't want to die!" Another spat. Seo ignored their jeers, fists clenched tightly, his steps steady and determined. One of the bandits charged, raising his club with a furious roar. "Didn't you hear me? Get lost!" But Seo stood firm, unfazed. In a flash, he struck with overwhelming force, sending the bandit crashing to the ground with a thunderous impact. The man's weapon flew from his hands as he was slammed down, defeated in an instant. The other bandits froze in shock, their eyes wide. "He took him down with one hit!" Seo casually picked up the fallen bandit's weapon, giving it a quick test in his grip. With a faint smirk, he muttered, "Not bad." As Seo walked calmly onto the shore with the fallen bandit at his back, he asked the bandits, "How many people have they killed?" The muscular bandit raised his massive spiked mace, veins bulging with rage, ready to attack Seo. He told him that he's killed 50, and that he will be happy to send him to them. But before the bandit could even finish his retort, Seo's strike ripped through him in a blur. Blood sprayed into the air as the giant stumbled, his mace slipping from his grip. Seo stood calm and unshaken. The surrounding bandits gasped in horror, fear flickering across their faces. Seo's cold voice cut through the silence. "From here on out, anyone who's killed before can come at me." From the tall wooden building overlooking the camp, watchful eyes peered down. The leaders had heard the commotion. Inside, they lounged around drinking and laughing, women pouring wine as they reveled without care. One of them roared in amusement, while another yanked harshly at a bound woman. "Come here, bitch!" he barked cruelly, making her cry out in fear. Just then, a bandit holding a cup of wine paused mid-pour, eyes narrowing toward the noise outside. "Who the hell is that?" he muttered. The doors burst open, flooding the room with blinding light. SEO stood at the entrance, his silhouette dark and menacing. In one hand, he gripped a bloodied club. In the other, he held the severed head of a bandit, letting it dangle for all to see. The room fell silent. Terror crept into every corner. Seated on a grand chair draped in tiger skin, the bandit leader glared with a cold sneer, his hand resting on the head of a growling tiger at his side. "You son of a bitch," he muttered darkly. Then, raising his voice, he roared, "Kill that rat!" Chaos erupted. Armed men drew their swords, surrounding Seo. The women were shoved aside, cowering in fear, while the leader sat back on his throne, confident. SEO tightened his grip on the club, his eyes burning with cold resolve. "No need to ask. You're all going to die." The aftermath was painted in blood. Bodies of bandits lay scattered across the ground, lifeless and broken. The once noisy stronghold stood silent, looming wooden buildings now drenched in crimson. The bandit leader, who had once sat proudly on his throne, now trembled on the floor, his face pale with terror. "You're a peak master," he stammered, pleading desperately. "Please, spare me." SEO stepped forward, his shoe pressing into a pool of blood. He asked coldly, "How long did this take?" The terrified leader, surrounded by corpses, stammered, "About 15 minutes." Blood streaked across Seo's face as he compared the moment to his past. "Last time, it took me a whole day to wipe them out. I had to set this place on fire, retreat, and take them one by one with poison. But this time, in just 15 minutes, I killed them all with a stick." The weight of his growth compared to his past life was undeniable. Seo loomed over the trembling bandit leader, his club dripping blood. "All right, now die. I'll tell you where I hid the money. Just spare me." Seo didn't care. With a brutal swing, his club silenced the plea. Blood splattered across the floor. "As for the money, I already know where it is, from the last time I was here." After wiping out the bandits, Seo calmly unlocked the heavy brass padlock, freeing dozens of captives. As he stepped outside, the freed people dropped to their knees, voices trembling with gratitude. "Thank you, brave one. You've taken revenge on these damned bandits." Seo's expression remained calm and unreadable. He only let out a quiet pause, their gratitude weighing little compared to his own thoughts. One of the captives looked up, his voice shaking. "Please, at least tell us your title, so we can repay our debt." SEO scratched the back of his head, glancing at the kneeling crowd. "A title." The crowd bowed even lower, voices rising with respect. "Do inform us." A confident smile curved Seo's lips as sunlight glinted across his face. "My title is Infinite Fighting Spirit." He went with Director Kim to Changho City. There, they used the bandits' money to buy identification plaques and a manor for themselves. After that, he was taught both martial arts and writing by Director Kim. Just like that, 2 months passed, and Director Kim sat in deep meditation, surrounded by glowing blue lotus lights with rare herbs placed in front of him. SEO looked at Director Kim and realized that he was growing faster than before. Watching this progress made Seo feel almost discouraged. Seo thought to himself that it had always been this way. For some, reaching the peak of martial arts could take a lifetime, while others could skip past the early stages altogether. With the guidance of a great master in powerful martial arts, they could even reach the realm of the 3 flowers gather at the summit. SEO walked toward Director Kim and offered his congratulations. He found it unbelievable that Director Kim had reached the realm of 3 flowers gather at the summit before even fully learning how to read. Director Kim admitted that he was quite surprised himself. He never expected that he would possess such great martial talent. SEO thought back and realized he had never truly had an evenly matched duel with Director Kim after Kim reached the realm of the 3 flowers. Instead, Director Kim had only been offering him guidance through sparring. Seo wondered how things would be now. He had already reached the martial peak, while Kim Young-hoon had just stepped into the realm of the 3 flowers. SEO asked Director Kim if he would be interested in a duel. Director Kim laughed and agreed, saying he might finally have a chance at winning this time. After agreeing, both of them headed toward the mountains. There, Seo and Director Kim clashed fiercely. Seo unleashed the Severing Mountain Sword, while Director Kim countered with Entering Mountain. The force of their blows shook the ground as the two exchanged powerful strikes. Director Kim swung his sword with fierce strength, unleashing the technique Severing Leyline Blade, Dragon Hill. Energy surged around him as the strike cut through the air with overwhelming power. Seeing this, Seo realized in shock that his blue energy lines were being pushed back. Feeling the pressure of Director Kim's attack, he quickly decided that he needed to dodge. However, Seo stopped and thought for a moment. He realized that if he dodged, he would just keep getting pushed back. Seo felt an intense urge to win rising inside his heart. He couldn't understand why the desire to triumph was burning so fiercely within him. He realized that this duel might be his very last chance, the only opportunity he would ever have to defeat Director Kim in this lifetime. Seo knew that Kim Young-hoon would continue to grow at an incredible pace. The next time they fought, Young-hoon's strength would reach a level that Seo could never hope to match. Seo and Director Kim clashed fiercely, their swords colliding in mid-air. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the forest, shaking the ground and trees around them. Seo gritted his teeth, realizing the weight of the duel. This moment, while Director Kim had just attained the realm of 3 flowers, this was his final chance to defeat him in this lifetime. Seo tightened his grip on his hidden weapons and steeled his resolve. Yeah, let's win! He charged forward with full determination, hurling his hidden blades as he shouted in his heart, using everything he had. Director Kim's eyes widened in surprise as Seo's hidden blades shot toward him. He quickly raised his sword, deflecting the incoming strikes with a sharp clang of steel. Seo steadied himself with his sword, a sharp look in his eyes. He had disrupted the flow of Kim's moves, feeling a brief opening in the clash. He pressed forward with determination, thinking to himself that he was ahead of him in terms of real combat experience, so he could win. Seo unleashed a powerful strike, shouting, "Severing mountain sword, flowing ridge." The ground split apart violently, sending rocks and shockwaves surging toward Director Kim. Director Kim's eyes gleamed with confidence as he charged forward through the debris. With a fierce smile, it was clear he would show Seo the stage that was the 3 flowers. Suddenly, Seo's eyes widened as his instincts screamed in alarm. Every sense in his body was sending him danger signals. Something big was coming, and he was right. Director Kim raised his sword high as blue energy swirled violently around him. He unleashed his strength, channeling enhanced blade ki into the strike. A devastating wave of blade ki tore through the ground as Director Kim unleashed his attack, splitting the earth apart and surging straight toward Seo with unstoppable force. Seo's gaze sharpened, sweat rolling down his face. He knew that if he tried to clash head-on with that attack, he would be completely severed. However, he refused to back down. He tightened his grip on his sword, energy swirling violently around him. The Severing Mountain sword he had trained so hard to master was now his only answer. The Severing Mountain sword was no ordinary technique. It was a martial art created by the genius Kim Young-hoon, who had mastered the 5 energies converging into the origin. Drawing upon that power, Seo unleashed his might. Severing Mountain sword, echoing valley. A blinding surge of sword energy split the skies, tearing through the forest below. The ground quaked, trees swayed violently, and birds scattered into the air as the devastating strike crashed down with unstoppable force. Dust and debris exploded into the air, filling the battlefield with a thick haze. Through the thick dust and swirling debris, a shadowy figure emerged with his sword still in hand. Director Kim's voice carried through the haze, filled with a mix of respect and thrill. He found it incredible. Seo panted heavily, his eyes wide with disbelief. Director Kim had withstood his counterattack. That strike was supposed to shatter the old man's blade and send him flying back, yet he still stood firm. However, Director Kim lowered his blade. His voice was calm yet heavy with finality as he admitted the truth. This battle was his defeat. Director Kim looked down at his broken weapon, a faint smile crossing his face. To him, having his blade shatter was a disgrace as a martial artist. Still, he acknowledged Seo with sincerity, admitting that he was truly experienced. Seo calmly sheathed his sword, his voice steady. There was no need for Director Kim to worry, because from this moment on, he knew that he would never again be able to defeat him. With the conclusion of today's battle, Seo accepted the truth. He would never again be able to defeat Kim Young-hoon, not in this lifetime, only perhaps in the next. Sometime later, both of them went back to the Grand Chamber. Seo told Director Kim that for reaching the stage where the 3 flowers gathered at the Summit Realm, a special reward had been prepared as a gift for him. Inside the quiet chamber, Director Kim let out a small laugh asking if the fierce duel they just had wasn't already his gift. Curious, he wondered if something more had been prepared. Seo stepped forward, holding out a box with both hands, and replied calmly that, indeed, here was the true present. Seo revealed the gift, a stack of ancient blue-bound scriptures. They were known as the scriptures of gazing cultivation and exceeding martial arts. He explained that he had acquired them from an old man who claimed that only those who had reached the realm of the three flowers could truly comprehend and master their contents. Seo admitted that he had tried reading the scriptures himself but couldn't make sense of them, so he decided to entrust them to Director Kim. With a pleased smile, Director Kim considered it a stroke of luck and accepted the gift gratefully. After Seo had taught him how to read, Kim Young-hoon immersed himself fully in the 6 volumes. He became deeply entranced by the scriptures of gazing cultivation and exceeding martial arts, losing himself in their profound teachings. 4 months passed, and the grand halls of the palace stood beneath the clear sky, marking the passage of time since Kim Young-hoon had begun his deep study of the scriptures. Seo returned with a bright smile, holding a heavy pouch in his hand. He called out to Young-hoon, telling him he had brought back money. With excitement, he explained that he had caught a big one this time, earning quite the bounty. But when he stepped into the room with the pouch of bounty in his hand, he noticed it was empty. Only the scriptures lay open on the floor. Looking around in confusion, he wondered aloud if Young-hoon had left. Seo's eyes swept across the empty room, settling on the scriptures left behind. A deep unease filled him as he realized he couldn't sense Young-hoon's presence at all. It was as if the man had completely vanished. Suddenly, a chilling pressure filled the room. From within the lingering aura, Kim Young-hoon emerged, wreathed in a dark, ominous energy. His eyes gleamed with newfound power, and a sinister smile spread across his face. Seo froze in shock, gasping as fear coursed through him. Kim Young-hoon laughed triumphantly, holding one of the scriptures in his hand. He explained that he had used a technique from the scriptures of gazing cultivation and exceeding martial arts, one that concealed his presence so completely that Seo couldn't detect him at all. His eyes gleamed with excitement as he declared that these books truly contained astonishing martial arts. Seo's voice trembled as he called out to him, realizing the gravity of what he had just witnessed. In his mind, he thought to himself, this strange technique was something Kim Young-hoon was only supposed to use after reaching the realm of the 5 energies gathering at the origin. Yet now, he was using it already, long before even a full year had passed since Seo's regression. Kim Young-hoon laughed as he held the scripture in his hands, explaining that this was just one of the many techniques recorded within it. He pointed out that if even a martial artist like Seo, who had already reached martial peak, couldn't sense his presence, then he could easily assassinate anyone he wished without being detected. Seo looked at Young-hoon with a faint smile, his eyes reflecting both admiration and a hint of unease. In his mind, he acknowledged the undeniable truth. Indeed, what stood before him was pure talent. Kim Young-hoon mentioned that he was preparing to travel across the lands to gain real combat experience and asked Seo if he wanted to join him. Seo, however, politely declined, saying he was fine without going. Young-hoon looked at him curiously, puzzled by his response, and asked what he meant. Seo explained that he wanted to focus on stabilizing his comprehension of martial peak, rather than traveling. Hearing this, Kim Young-hoon nodded in understanding, noting that Seo was still at the beginning stage of martial peak and had yet to master the use of sword silk. Seo admitted that while stabilizing his martial peak was important, something else had caught his attention. He had begun to develop an interest in the imperial regime. Hearing this, Kim Young-hoon tilted his head slightly, surprised, and repeated the words with curiosity. Imperial regime? Seo explained that if he managed to secure a position within the government, there might come a day when he could lend support to Young-hoon, who would likely be active within the Murim world by then. Hearing this, Director Kim gave a warm smile and thanked Seo with gratitude. After that, Seo and Director Kim chose to part ways for the time being, each setting out on their own path. Yet deep down, Seo admitted to himself that his desire to join the imperial regime wasn't solely out of interest. It was driven by other, more personal reasons he had yet to reveal. From the knowledge Seo had accumulated during his time as the strategist of the Martial Arts Alliance, he knew one crucial truth. The imperial family of Yangguo had deeper ties with cultivators than any other mortal organization. This connection made them uniquely influential, and it was one of the main reasons he set his sights on the imperial regime. According to rumors, it was said that the imperial family of Yangguo was not purely mortal, but in fact a collateral branch tied to a powerful clan of cultivators. With this knowledge in mind, Seo made his choice. he submitted his application to the Yangguo military, setting his plan into motion. Seo's reputation as a renowned bounty hunter earned him swift acceptance into the Yangguo military. Once inside, his unmatched skills and combat prowess allowed him to climb the ranks at a remarkable pace until he eventually secured the position of general. Seo then set his sights higher, applying for the elite position of Imperial Guard. With his abilities, he passed the selection with ease. Achieving such a prestigious role within just 5 years of his regression was a clear testament to how far he had come. An elder official reminded Seo of the weight of his new role. His duty as an Imperial Guard was to put his very life on the line to protect His Majesty. With a sharp look, the man added that a martial artist who had reached the peak realm should certainly be capable of fulfilling such a responsibility. Seo nodded firmly, gripping his weapon with resolve. With steady eyes, he assured the elder official that he would be sure to do so. Seo entered the Imperial family's shadow guards, and, after undergoing rigorous training in stealth and hidden breathing techniques, he was soon assigned to duty. After that, the day came when Seo was finally granted the honor of meeting the Emperor. In that moment, Seo made a startling realization. He had discovered something truly surprising. To his astonishment, he realized the truth. The Emperor himself was a cultivator. Seo could sense it clearly. The consciousness of a cultivator. The Emperor was not an ordinary ruler, but a cultivator who had been born with a spiritual root. Although he still could not believe his eyes, his lingering doubts were erased after he encountered several of the Emperor's kin. It became clear that the majority of the Imperial family were cultivators as well, each possessing the consciousness to match. However, he noticed that the Imperial family members did not appear to be higher-ranked cultivators. None of them came anywhere close to the level of that fox he encountered when he came into this world. Even so, Seo realized that they were cultivators of the Qi refining realm. Still, he could not understand why a martial artist who had only just reached martial peak was required to guard them. Although he could sense that the Emperor's consciousness was far greater than that of someone at the Qi refining stage, first star. With such overwhelming power, the Emperor alone was stronger than all of the Shadow Guards combined. Seo realized that the Shadow Guard existed merely as a convenience for the Emperor, something he relied on because he was too lazy to personally deal with assassins. The Emperor was known as the man who faced the greatest number of assassination attempts in the entire empire. Assassins came after the Emperor almost every single night, and whenever they did, Seo was the one who took care of them. Although it was tough every day, at the very least, facing these assassins gave him the chance to gain more experience. And just like that, 5 years went by as Seo faithfully served the Empire as a member of the Shadow Guard. During that time, Director Kim rose to the position of Alliance Leader. However, since Seo was serving as a member of the Shadow Guard, he was unable to officially meet with the Alliance Leader. So Seo arranged to meet Director Kim in secret. The two shared drinks together, catching up on each other's lives. And then, not long after, events took a sudden turn. That night, within the lantern-lit building, Director Kim tightly gripped his sword. Dark red energy swirled around the blade, hinting that he was about to break through to another realm. Seo's sharp eyes caught sight of the red lines. He realized they represented the most optimal trajectories his opponent could use to strike at him. Seeing Director Kim, he could feel the danger radiating from the red lines. If he stepped into that area, Director Kim's attacks would slice through him instantly. Seo paused as a familiar sensation washed over him. This feeling was unmistakable. It was the consciousness of a cultivator. Seo thought to himself how unfortunate it was. If he had already reached the stage of 3 flowers, he would have been able to see far more. For now, he decided to carefully examine Director Kim's current condition. Although it was difficult to fully grasp what he was seeing, he believed this sight would serve as an important clue for comprehending Sword Silk. Meanwhile, Director Kim slowly exhaled, releasing a faint blue mist from his mouth, a clear sign of the powerful energy flowing within him. His body erupted with blazing energy as golden flames burst forth, his aura surging wildly while his robes tore apart under the overwhelming power. In the next moment, his physique transformed, brimming with power. A confident smile spread across his face as he declared that his body had changed. Seo, watching this, remarked with a faint smile that Director Kim had grown younger. In response, Director Kim confirmed proudly that he had successfully reached the state of 5 energies converging to the origin. Director Kim noted that it was unfortunate for Seo. Had Seo attained the stage of 3 flowers, he would have gained far more from this experience. Seo agreed with the thought, but humbly admitted that it was his own fault. His skills were still too lacking. but Director Kim told Seo that it should still be of some help, advising him to ponder over it more carefully once he returned. As they walked under the night sky, Seo asked Director Kim if he had met a few cultivators by now. Director Kim replied with a simple nod, confirming that he had. As they continued walking through the quiet forest, Seo remarked that Director Kim's domain felt very similar to the consciousness cultivators possessed. He then asked if Director Kim thought there might be a connection between the two. Director Kim agreed that there might indeed be a connection. Within the region around him, he believed he could face cultivators at the chi refining stage head-on. He added that perhaps those who reached the state of 5 energies converging to the origin could gain a sight similar to what cultivators possessed. Seo quietly acknowledged the insight, realizing that even martial artists could train in a way similar to cultivators once they attained the state of 5 energies converging to the origin. Seo reflected that just as the gap between first rate and martial peak was vast, the difference between martial peak and the state of 5 energies converging to the origin must be even greater. The shift in perception at that level was so immense that it became difficult to even imagine what it could truly be. He thought to himself that the experience he gained today would surely aid him when the time came for him to pursue the state of 5 energies. After receiving guidance from Kim Young-hoon, he made his way back to the palace. A few days later, as he was patrolling, the palace halls suddenly grew quiet under the dim glow of lanterns. From the shadows above, a figure crept along the beams of the grand hall. Seo's sharp eyes caught the movement immediately, and he recognized the threat at once. Another assassin had infiltrated the palace. Seo swiftly drew his blade, his senses sharpening as red energy locked onto him. In that instant, he realized the danger. This assassin was no ordinary foe. They were at the level of martial peak. In a flash, the assassin's blade shot forward, glowing with deadly force as it tore through the air. However, Seo calmly assessed the situation as he deflected the assassin's strike. From the flow of their movements, he could tell that, although they had reached martial peak, their control was unrefined. It was clear they had only recently attained that level. The assassin leapt from above with a fierce cry, dagger raised high, aiming to strike Seo down in a single decisive blow. From below, Seo stood firm, his gaze steady as he prepared to counter the attack. Steel clashed against steel as Seo met the assassin's strike head-on. Sparks burst from each impact, the hall echoing with the sharp clangs of their weapons. Both fighters moved with speed and precision, locked in a fierce struggle for dominance. Seo's eyes narrowed as he studied the assassin's movements mid-battle. Something about their technique felt unusual, prompting a sharp thought in his mind. It was peculiar. Seo knew he should be focusing entirely on the battle before him, yet his mind wavered. The vivid image of Kim Young-hoon attaining the state of 5 energies lingered in his thoughts, refusing to fade. As Seo steadied his glowing blade, a thought surfaced in his mind. What exactly was sword energy? He recalled the teachings he had heard. Sword energy was proof that one had become truly united with the sword, a sign of reaching the intermediate stages of first rate. He recalled the principle behind sword energy. Once a martial artist reached martial peak, they could perceive the optimal trajectories of their strikes. As long as the sword followed that perfect pathway, the flow of sword energy would never falter. As Seo clashed blades with the assassin, clarity filled his mind. The lines he saw before him were the most flawless paths his sword arts could ever pursue. Sword energy, he realized, was the essence of becoming one with his sword style, drawing out its full potential to the absolute maximum. Through his training, he came to a realization. Sword martial arts and sword energy were, in essence, the same. Yet as the thought settled in his mind, doubt crept in. He paused, questioning himself. Hold on. That couldn't be right. If sword martial arts and sword energy were truly the same, then wouldn't even Zhongshi, mindless corpses controlled by cultivators, be able to wield sword energy as long as they were taught the sword? The idea didn't sit right with him. In the midst of combat, Seo's realization deepened. Sword energy was not merely martial arts. Though born from martial techniques, it was something beyond them, an essence greater than simple swordplay. As the truth dawned on him, clarity flashed in his eyes. Seo came to understand that while sword energy was forged through martial arts, its true source lay deeper. At its core, it was born from the human spirit, the will and intention of the martial artist wielding the blade. Seo's realization deepened as he observed the glowing lines. The red and blue paths before him were not just perfect attack trajectories, They were the manifestation of a martial artist's intent. Each line represented the will behind the sword, the very trajectory of intention itself. The moment he grasped that truth, a strange sensation flowed from the hand gripping his sword. It felt as though living veins had sprouted from the blade itself, weaving into his arm and connecting them as one. Just then, the assassin lunged forward with deadly speed, their blades slicing through the air with precision. Every movement carried lethal intent. The strike aimed straight at Seo without hesitation. However, Seo flipped above his opponent, his sword cutting down in a sweeping arc. The assassin below countered with equal ferocity, their strike rising to meet his. Sparks flew as steel collided, the sound echoing sharply through the grand hall. The assassin's eyes widened in shock as a powerful clash erupted, blasting out a wave of force. The impact sent debris flying, and the masked figure staggered back, struggling to withstand the overwhelming strike. As the force of the clash tore through the hall, the assassin's mask was ripped away, revealing the face of a young woman beneath. Her eyes widened in shock, blood trickling from fresh cuts across her face as she realized her disguise had been shattered. Seo's strike landed with overwhelming force, sending the young woman flying across the hall. Her blade shattered into fragments, scattering through the air as her body crashed hard against the floor, rolling helplessly from the impact. Seo's gaze hardened as he looked ahead, his voice steady with resolve. He knew the battle wasn't finished yet. This was far from the end. Seo tightened his grip around the blade, blue energy surging violently from within. He realized that if he kept pouring his intent into the sword, its power would continue to grow, fusing completely with his will. The young woman staggered back on the floor, her body trembling as her eyes widened in shock. She could feel the overwhelming surge of power building in Seo's sword, and dread washed over her at the sight. Seo's eyes widened with realization, a mix of awe and certainty flashing across his face. He finally understood. The power he had only imagined was not a mere concept. Sword energy could truly be forged and manifested in reality. Within 10 years of stepping into the realm of Peak Master, Seo had broken through once more. He finally awakened Sword Silk, a mark of refined mastery, and with it, he rose to the intermediate levels of martial peak. The young woman, battered and bloodied, struggled to push herself up, her eyes filled with both fear and defiance. Seo stepped forward with calm, deliberate steps, the glow of Sword Silk illuminating his path. His presence was heavy, his gaze sharp as he looked down at her. Recognition flickered in his eyes. A shadowed smile crossed his face as he remarked coldly that her features seemed familiar. In that instant, a memory surfaced. He recalled seeing her before, dressed not as an assassin, but as one of the Emperor's new handmaidens. Seo stood tall, his sword lowered, but his presence oppressive as he looked down at the fallen assassin. He remarked coldly that to reach the level of peak master at such a young age was no small feat. With such talent, she could have surely advanced further, perhaps even attained the stage of gathering the 3 flowers. But then his tone sharpened, reminding her that such a future would only have been possible if she were allowed to live. Struggling on the floor, her voice trembled as she recognized Seo, calling him by the title whispered among warriors, the infinite fighting spirit. Upon hearing this, Seo came closer to her and asked if she truly knew who he was. Seo remembered 10 years ago, his name had spread far and wide. Back then, he was revered as the infinite fighting spirit, a warrior of unmatched willpower. But as time passed, his reputation twisted. Fear replaced respect, and whispers in the Yan Kingdom began to call him something else. The infinite fighting monster. Blood dripped from her lips as she forced out her words, her body trembling with rage and grief. She admitted that her little brother had been far more talented than she ever was, but his brilliance had been cut short, all because of that wretched emperor. Seo's expression remained cold, his voice steady and unyielding. Appealing to his emotions was meaningless. He would not be swayed. The law was clear, and to him there was no exception. Assassins were to be executed on the spot. Just then, a group of guards stormed in, weapons drawn and eyes blazing with fury. Their leader's voice thundered through the chamber, declaring the alarm. Another assassin attack had begun. The wounded woman fell to her knees, desperation in her eyes as she cried out. She pleaded with Seo, known as the infinite fighting monster, telling him he was making a mistake. Her voice trembled as she revealed the truth. The common people were dying because of the Emperor's cruel orders. But before she could finish her words, a swift slash cut through the air. Blood splattered across the hall, silencing her plea in an instant. Seo's voice was calm but merciless as he spoke. He admitted he was sorry, yet in his position, allowing himself to be swayed by an assassin's words would be a grave crime. With that resolve, he raised his sword high. The lifeless body lay at his feet as the blade gleamed coldly under the palace lights, the execution carried out without hesitation. However, a faint pang of regret stirred within him for ending such a remarkable talent with his own hands. Yet there was no time to dwell on it. With the help of his fellow guards, he quietly tended to the aftermath, lifting the fallen body and cleaning the traces of what had just transpired. After that, Seo glanced toward the emperor's chambers, noting how much noise had erupted just moments earlier. Yet, as expected, the emperor never stirred. The reason soon became clear. A powerful soundproofing spell had been cast around the emperor's quarters. It was almost as if he had no need to conceal the truth, boldly showing that he was, in fact, a cultivator. Everyone in the Shadow Guard was well aware that the Emperor was a cultivator. For those who had reached the level of peak master, it was easy to perceive a cultivator's domain with their own eyes. As the guards moved swiftly, one of them gave a sharp order, demanding that the scene be cleaned up without leaving a single trace behind. Seo knew the Shadow Guards protected the Emperor without question, for it was the duty entrusted to them. None of them dared to complain, no matter the burden. Still, a troubling thought lingered. Assassination attempts on the Emperor had been growing more frequent with each passing day. Although the Yan Kingdom had recently entered a time of peace and prosperity under the Emperor's rule, poverty still lingered among some. Yet there were no longer cases of commoners falling into ruin and resorting to banditry just to survive. Seo pondered deeply, questioning who could be so relentless in sending assassins after the Emperor. Examining the weapon, he noticed it had been coated with a deadly poison. What troubled him even more was the realization that the assassin came from the Yan Kingdom itself, and even knew his title. But he decided not to rush and thought it best to take his time to uncover the truth. As he walked down the dark halls of the Imperial Palace, his steps echoing, he reminded himself of his true purpose. He had come here not for power or politics, but simply to gather information about cultivators. 10 years passed. During that time, Seo faithfully carried out his duties as a guard. Through his steady service, he gradually earned the Emperor's trust. At the same time, Seo made use of the authority he had gained to uncover information from every corner of the Imperial Palace. Of course, there were limits. Classified knowledge remained beyond his reach. By carefully piecing together documents that were only available in the government offices, Seo managed to uncover something valuable. Through his persistence, he finally found a clue about the elusive cultivator clans. At long last, he had succeeded. He finally discovered the region where the cultivator clans resided. Seo sighed in frustration, realizing just how difficult it was to gather information about cultivators. Still, despite the challenge, he admitted to himself that this was far better than the days he had spent as the strategist of the Murim Alliance. Seo reflected on his progress, realizing that perhaps it was because he gained real combat experience almost every night. At this pace, he believed he could aim to reach the state where the three blossoms converge within this very lifetime. Just then, he picked up the next document, murmuring to himself that it was the census report. The record stated that in the 33rd year of the High Aeon calendar, by the grace of His Majesty the Emperor, the number of orphans and beggars had greatly decreased. Because of this, the number of people joining bandit groups had nearly disappeared altogether. Seo flipped through the pages of the report, his brow furrowing. It was supposed to be an official document prepared by the government office, yet the writing and details were surprisingly careless. He couldn't help but wonder why it was so sloppy. The report in Seo's hands seemed incomplete. Though it claimed the number of beggars had decreased, the crucial detail was absent. The most important part was missing. How exactly had the numbers fallen so sharply? That unanswered question lingered in Seo's mind. Seo's eyes narrowed as the thought crossed his mind. Could it be that they had all starved to death? Yet he quickly dismissed the idea. If such a large number of people had truly perished from starvation, his past self would have undoubtedly known about it. It wasn't a simple matter of the poor moving up the social ladder, nor had the Emperor provided relief or created new livelihoods for them. To Seo, it felt as though these people had not risen or been saved at all. They had simply been erased quietly, as if wiped from existence. Besides, there had been no famine, nor had any war broken out in the Yan Kingdom. Yet, despite the peace, how did they disappear? He also remembered that assassin woman telling him the truth. The common people were dying, and it was all because of the emperor's cruel orders. However, SEO found the situation strange. The current emperor might not have been a saint, but he was at least a capable ruler. Average, if nothing more. That alone made it puzzling. If the poor hadn't simply vanished due to neglect or incompetence, then where had all these erased people truly gone? SEO considered the matter carefully. If it was something even the government offices couldn't fully grasp, then there was a strong chance it was connected to the cultivator clans. Time and again, these gaps in information always seemed to lead back to them. SEO turned toward the window, his thoughts firm. From here on, the matter was no longer his to pursue. The investigation beyond this point would have to be left in the hands of Kim Young-hee. At the Murim Alliance, a grand ceremony was held to mark the retirement of its first lord, Kim Young-hee. Many mourned his departure, unwilling to see such a great leader step down. Yet, in contrast to their sorrow, Kim Young-hee himself appeared calm, even relieved, as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted from his shoulders, and there was good reason for his relief. Kim Young-hee's retirement from the position of Murim Alliance Lord signified something greater. He had completely mastered the 6 volumes of the Josuwol Mugyeong and was now preparing to set out on a new journey, one that would lead him to seek out the cultivators themselves. Seo stepped into the room quietly, his movements so light that he startled Director Kim inside. At first, Director Kim mistook him for an assassin, only to realize it was Seo. He remarked how refreshed Seo looked, yet noted with unease that his presence carried an aura, one that felt more and more like that of an assassin. Seo relayed the information and conclusions he had gathered from the Imperial Palace to Kim Young-hee without delay. As expected, the moment Seo mentioned that the matter seemed tied to the cultivator clans, Kim Young-hee's interest sharpened noticeably. Seo shared that he knew of several places where the cultivator clans resided. He asked Brother Kim to investigate further and dig up information on them. Brother Kim agreed readily, admitting that he too had been curious to uncover what those clans were plotting. And so, with Kim Young-hee's guidance, the decision was made to uncover the hidden schemes of the cultivator clans. After that, Seo went back to the palace. That night, the palace stood silent beneath the starry sky. Guards reported to their vice commander, Seo, that the north gate was clear. Seo nodded. However, he had recently noted how the number of assassin intrusions had decreased. He reasoned that even their enemies couldn't afford to endlessly send peak-level masters into the palace. But just then, chaos erupted as a shout rang out. An assassin had appeared at the east gate. Flames burst forth, engulfing the area, and one of the guards was caught in the fire, screaming in agony as his body burned. Amidst the blaze, a figure stood calmly, holding a talisman glowing with eerie energy. With a cold gaze, he observed the scene and noted that the guards were all peak-level masters. The intruder, with his blue hair tied back and a talisman still glowing faintly at his side, found himself surrounded by palace guards. He muttered in irritation, calling the situation a nuisance. His concealment arts, usually flawless, were being disrupted by the sharp perception of the guards, making it difficult for him to remain hidden. Seo's eyes widened in shock as he realized the truth. The intruder was actually a cultivator. He thought their enemies had run out of peak masters, and were now desperate enough to send a cultivator disguised as an assassin. One of the commanders shouted in alarm, confirming that the intruder was indeed a cultivator. His voice rang through the hall as he ordered everyone to stay alert and be on their guard, preparing for the battle ahead. The blue-haired cultivator sneered as he spread a handful of glowing talismans in his hands. With arrogance in his voice, he mocked the guards, asking if they truly believed they could stand against him. He declared that the so-called peak masters they had faced were only cultivators stuck at the first level of the chi refining stage, far weaker than him. The cultivator rose into the air, talismans swirling around him as dark energy gathered. With a voice filled with pride, he revealed his true power, not just a beginner, but one who had already reached the second level of the chi refining stage. Flames ignited in his hands, wrapping around the glowing talismans. With a cruel smile, he vowed that after slaughtering everyone present, he would hunt down and kill the man from the collateral branch of the Makli clan. The cultivator unleashed his attack, fiery talismans streaking through the air like blazing spears. Explosions erupted as the flames struck, engulfing the hall in a sea of fire. Guards caught in the blast screamed in agony, their bodies consumed by the raging inferno, as the palace echoed with their cries. The cultivator smirked, his arrogant laughter echoing through the burning hall as flames devoured everything around him. He believed no one present could match his strength. But from within the inferno, Seo emerged. He cut through the sea of flames, sword in hand, his presence radiating unshakable resolve. The fire parted around him, as though even the blaze dared not touch his blade. The cultivator's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at his opponent. Never had he imagined anyone would withstand his blazing strike. Yet Seo before him met his gaze with unshaken resolve. The cultivator looked down with a cold, piercing gaze. He remarked that for someone who had only managed to block a single attack, survival would not last long. The cultivator floated above the ground, talismans circling him like predators waiting to strike. His gaze bore down on the warrior below, filled with disdain. With a cold, venomous voice he spat out his words, calling the man beneath him nothing more than an insect, unworthy of standing in his presence. Meanwhile, outside, a sudden burst of light shook the ground as a powerful barrier formed around the palace, sealing everything inside. The guards outside stumbled back in shock, their weapons trembling in their hands. One of them cursed under his breath, realizing it was a barrier. Confusion spread quickly among the soldiers as they stared at the glowing dome. They muttered to each other, wondering what was happening within the palace walls. The air grew heavy with tension, and unease clouded their faces. The soldiers grew restless as the barrier pulsed with a dark purple glow. Fear spread among them, and one of the guards questioned if a cultivator had launched an attack. Realizing the danger, another guard shouted urgently for reinforcements, ordering his comrades to call for more troops at once. Meanwhile, inside, one of the guards collapsed to his knees, his clothes torn and stained with blood. Around him, the bodies of fallen comrades lay scattered, some burned beyond recognition as flames devoured their remains. His breathing was heavy, every gasp sounding strained as he tried to steady himself with his weapon. But before he could regain his strength, a massive explosion erupted nearby. The palace shook violently as fire burst forth, swallowing everything in a storm of blazing heat and destruction. Through the blazing chaos, Seo pushed forward with determined steps, his body bloodied but his will unshaken. His sword gleamed with a sharp blue light as he gathered all his strength. He thought to himself that even holding on for a single second could turn the tide. If he could evolve his sword silk into sword-enhanced ki, then perhaps he could pierce through the overwhelming power before him. The cultivator laughed arrogantly, his barrier shining brightly as talismans floated in the air around him. He declared that no matter how many times it was attempted, Seo's power would never be enough to break through his defensive techniques. But Seo charged forward without hesitation, blood streaking down his face as his sword burned with fierce blue energy. The clash thundered through the hall, his strike tearing against the glowing barrier with unstoppable force. For the first time, the cultivator's mocking smile twisted into shock. His eyes widened in disbelief as he shouted in anger and fear, cursing Seo and calling him a madman. Seo launched himself downward with all the strength he had left, his sword blazing with crackling energy as it tore through the air. The cultivator was struck, his body thrown back violently, blood spraying as the attack ripped into him. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. Seo's sword-enhanced ki, into which he had poured every last bit of his remaining energy, fizzled out almost instantly. Blood poured from his mouth as his body weakened. He realized with bitter clarity that without a deeper understanding, it was nearly impossible to maintain sword-enhanced ki for even a single second. He fell to the ground without even giving a proper fight. The cultivator stood at the center of the hall, his body wrapped in a glowing blue barrier. With a single release of power, he sent shockwaves rippling outward, throwing soldiers off their feet and leaving them sprawled across the ground. The surviving guards, bloodied but still standing, looked on with fury and disbelief. The cultivator roared in fury, his body surging with power as he leapt forward. With a heavy step, he came crashing down, stomping Seo violently into the ground. Seo coughed blood, his body writhing in pain from the brutal strike. Enraged beyond reason, the cultivator's eyes burned with hatred. His voice thundered as he spat out his prideful wrath, demanding how a lowly creature like Seo dared to lay a cut on him. The cultivator clenched his sleeve tightly, his voice dripping with venom. He admitted that at first, he had only planned to toy with Seo before turning his attention to the branch family member of the Makli clan. But now, his rage had shifted his intentions entirely. With fury in his eyes, he declared that he would impale Seo on a pike and crush him bit by bit until death finally claimed him. As he roared, countless talismans scattered into the air, transforming into deadly, spiraling spears that radiated killing intent, all aimed at Seo. The vice squad leader and his men tried to intervene, but the golden spears of energy rained down without mercy. Several soldiers were pierced through instantly, blood spraying as their cries echoed through the hall. The blue-haired cultivator didn't even spare them a second glance. His cold voice cut through the chaos as he dismissed their lives with disdain, warning them not to interrupt him. To him, they were nothing more than insects beneath his feet. The blue-haired cultivator stood tall, his gaze cold as he looked down on Seo, who lay bloodied beneath him. His voice rang with arrogance as he declared that no matter how much one struggled, resistance against a cultivator was meaningless. In the end, he said, Seo's fate was nothing more than to be crushed under his foot. The remaining soldiers nearby trembled at the sight, their faces grim and uncertain. Some tried to steady their weapons, while others froze, caught between fear and duty, as Seo's pained coughs echoed weakly through the hall. Seo lay sprawled on the ground, blood pouring from his mouth as his body trembled with pain. His breath came out ragged, each cough staining the floor crimson. Inwardly he cursed himself. He had recklessly pushed too much ki through his body at once. Now his insides were in complete disarray, leaving him barely able to move under the crushing pressure of the cultivator standing over him. The cultivator looked down at Seo in surprise, realizing the man was still clinging to life despite his battered state. With a cruel grin, he raised his foot and stomped down mercilessly, blood splattering across the floor. His voice dripped with contempt as he mocked Seo, eager to see just how long this so-called insect could endure under his torment. Seo lay broken on the ground, blood pooling beneath his face. His weary eyes stared forward as a bitter thought crossed his mind. Yeah, he was no different from an insect. His talent, his skills, even his life, all of it was as insignificant as a bug's. Even in that moment of despair, he accepted this cruel truth about himself. The cultivator looked down at Seo with a mocking smile. His voice dripped with arrogance as he sneered, asking if Seo was begging for his life. Seo's body trembled under the crushing weight of his enemy's foot, blood pooling around him. Yet, even as his vision blurred, his thoughts burned fiercely. The countless hours of training, the endless years of pain and endurance, none of it could simply vanish. With a sudden surge of will, his bloodied hand slammed against the ground, forcing his battered body upward. The cultivator's eyes widened in surprise at Seo's defiance. Inwardly, Seo analyzed the cultivator. He realized from the way the man had used stealth, it was clear. This was someone who had never properly trained his body, nor had he learned to fight with awareness of distance. Seo judged that he was nothing more than a man born with raw talent, fortunate enough to step onto the path of cultivation, but lacking the discipline and foundation to stand. Seo's bloodied hand clung tightly to his enemy's robe as his body trembled from pain. His vision blurred, yet his thoughts burned with bitter resolve. He realized he could lose to such a man. He could fall here, facing such a bastard. The weight of that truth pressed down on him, heavier than the cultivator's foot itself. Seo's bloodied hand clenched tighter, even as pain tore through his body. He refused to accept that all the years he had endured, the endless effort he had poured into training, had been meaningless. His voice, raw and trembling, carried the weight of his resolve. He would not accept that he could never rise to a higher stage. He would not give in. Through blood and defiance, Seo roared that even the struggle of an insect carried meaning. The cultivator roared in fury, calling Seo filthy as talismans ignited into flames around him. He demanded that Seo remove his hands at once. But then, in the heat of his rage, his expression suddenly faltered. Blood trickled from his nose, and shock spread across his face. For the first time, confusion replaced his arrogance. But Seo's sharp gaze burned with grim determination. Inside, Seo knew the truth. The poison was working. The burst of ki he had used earlier, the strike meant to break through the cultivator's defenses, was only a means to an end. The real weapon had always been the poison coating his blade. That was the trap he had set from the very beginning. The cultivator's face twisted in panic as the realization hit him. His body trembled, blood spilling from his mouth and nose while his vision blurred. He stammered in desperation, cursing the poison now coursing through his veins. His hands shook as he tried to muster his strength, muttering frantically that he needed to nullify it before it was too late. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance in his eyes. Seo's eyes burned with cold fury as he pinned the cultivator down. He would never allow him the chance to nullify the poison. He forced the cultivator's jaw shut, silencing any chance of an incantation. At the same time, he clamped down on his arm, preventing him from forming seals. With blood dripping from his mouth and strength still surging in his grip, Seo snarled that now the arrogant cultivator should try casting his spells, if he still could. The guards panicked as they saw the cultivator struggling under Seo's grip. One of them shouted desperately to help Seo, and several men rushed forward with weapons drawn. But before they could reach him, the burning talismans shattered with a deafening crack. The defensive barrier that had protected the hall collapsed in an instant. From outside, soldiers cried out that the defensive technique had broken. With renewed vigor, they charged forward, storming into the palace as their boots thundered against the floor. The cultivator's lifeless body collapsed on the ground, his face twisted in horror. Seo stood over the corpse, his body battered and covered in blood, yet his eyes burned with cold determination. He remembered how his enemy had once mocked him, belittling him as nothing more than an insect. Now, with the cultivator lying lifeless before him, Seo's thoughts carried a bitter edge. That same man who had looked down on him with arrogance was no different in death, proving that all his cruelty and pride had led to nothing. Next day, golden roofs shimmered under the bright blue sky as the grand palace stood tall and silent, surrounded by red walls and towering pillars. Inside one of the rooms, a warm lantern hung from the ceiling, gently swaying as thin smoke filled the air. Seo slowly opened his eyes, blinking in confusion as he stared at the ceiling above him. From nearby, a calm voice asked him, "Are you awake?" He turned his head to see an elderly man sitting beside his bed, calmly smoking a long pipe. Coughing lightly, he spoke weakly, asking, "Is it okay to smoke next to a patient?" The old man gave a small laugh and told him not to talk nonsense. "Tobacco is a great herb." Seo, lying in bed, stared blankly at him, stunned by what he'd just heard. What is he even saying? He thought in disbelief. Then it hit him. He realized that this must be like medieval times. Seo slowly sat up on the bed, feeling the strength return to his body. It was lighter than before, and a calm relief washed over him. The old man sitting nearby spoke with a composed tone, explaining that His Majesty had appointed one of the royal doctors to treat him. He reminded Seo to be grateful, for such a favor from the king was rare. As Seo listened, a faint smile appeared on his face. He finally understood why the royal physicians were so respected. Their skill was beyond ordinary. Deep inside, he began to wonder if he could one day learn from such masters. His gaze then fell upon his right hand, which was tightly wrapped in bandages. The old man noticed and said softly that the doctor had done all he could. Seo would be able to use his hand again, but it would never be quite the same. It was still healing, and he was warned not to move it too much. Seo raised his hand and studied it quietly. The memory of the battle came back to him, how the cultivator had crushed his hand without mercy. Yet, instead of anger, a faint smile touched his lips. Despite everything, he was simply grateful that he could still move it at all. The old man looked at Seo and nodded, saying it was good that he could stay positive despite everything. He then mentioned that the king had decided to reward Seo for his brave service. On the table before them sat a small, ornate blue box trimmed with gold, a royal gift. Since the members of the Shadow Guard could not be officially rewarded in public, the old man had been sent to deliver the gift in secret. He asked if Seo was able to move, and seeing him nod, he stood up and began to read the royal decree aloud. With a steady voice he announced, "By His Majesty's command, Seo Yun-hyun, Vice Captain of the Shadow Guard, for throwing himself into danger to protect the throne, His Majesty bestows upon him the Chukoden, the legendary pill said to be taken by cultivators." Hearing those words, Seo knelt down on the wooden floor, lowering his head in deep respect. His voice echoed through the quiet room as he declared, "Long live His Majesty." Seo carefully opened the ornate blue box, and inside it lay a small, glowing red pill resting on soft black silk. The light from the pill shimmered faintly, filling the room with a quiet sense of awe. The old man beside him began to explain that the pill was a modified version of the Chukoden, the kind of pill cultivators use to advance their chi and reach the foundation stage. This version, however, lacked the pure essence of the original. Seo listened, nodding slowly, though he didn't fully understand what any of it meant. As he gazed at the pill, realization began to dawn on him. He remembered the name Chukoden. It was something he had heard before. His eyes narrowed as a thought crossed his mind. Chukoden's residue. Memories from his past surfaced. Seo once worked in a medical center, where he had occasionally helped make elixirs. He recalled how, during the process, a thick residue would always remain after refining the ingredients. Looking at the pill again, he understood the truth. What he had received was not the pure Chukoden, but a pill created from the leftover remains of one, the kind usually sold cheaply to drunks or wandering cultists. It had no real effect. A faint smile appeared on his face, though it carried a trace of bitterness. He understood now. The Emperor's gift was nothing more than a gesture. Inwardly, he couldn't help but think how petty the Emperor was. The old man beside him, unaware of the truth, spoke proudly. He said he had heard that this pill could extend a person's life by 10 years. Seo's eyes widened in shock at the claim. 10 years? He could hardly believe it. Trying to make sense of it, Seo looked back at the pill, puzzled. He could tell that the old man seemed envious, his gaze lingering on the small red sphere. Still, Seo knew there was nothing the man could do. The gift had come directly from the Emperor himself. No one dared question it, even if the truth behind the reward was far less grand than it appeared. Seo gazed at the glowing red pill resting in his hand, its light flickering softly against the walls of the quiet room. After a moment of thought, he decided he would only take it once his internal veins had completely healed. The old man beside him nodded and reminded him to always remember the kindness of His Majesty before taking his leave. Left alone, Seo stood silently, the sunlight spilling across the floor. He looked down at the small pill with a calm expression. Inwardly, he reasoned that it would be best to use it only at the edge of death, when all strength was gone, to test whether it truly possessed the power it claimed. Though he knew its origins were humble, he still couldn't ignore the small hope it offered. A faint smile appeared on Seo's face as he studied the pill once more. The thought of gaining even 10 more years of life filled him with quiet relief. To receive such a thing, even if flawed, felt like a blessing in disguise. As he stood there, light shining through the palace windows, Seo's heart grew steadier. The weight of his journey no longer felt as heavy. Gazing out toward the grand palace rooftops under the bright sky, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, as though this new path, this fourth life, would finally unfold in his favor. Next day, under the bright blue sky, the training ground stood silent except for the sound of wind brushing against the wooden stands. Suddenly a loud impact shook the arena's floor as a sword struck the ground, scattering dust into the air. Seo clenched his wounded hand and groaned, his face tightening from the sharp pain that spread through his arm. The skin along his palm was scarred and rough, trembling from the strain. Even though his injuries had healed, the pain refused to fade. Every time he tried to grip his sword tightly, a burning sensation tore through his veins, forcing him to loosen his hold. His once steady hand now betrayed him, and his strikes lacked the precision they once carried. Standing alone in the empty arena, Seo looked down at the sword lying before him. He could no longer perform the severing mountain swordsmanship, a technique that once defined his strength. The thought weighed heavily on his mind. As the breeze carried the sound of silence across the field, a bitter question echoed in his heart. Was this where his martial arts journey would end in this new life? Seo tightened his trembling fist, his knuckles cracking as blood surged through his wounded hand. Pain shot up his arm, but his resolve burned brighter than the ache. He refused to give in. The thought of surrendering was unthinkable. Seo had climbed through endless trials, facing death and despair, to stand where he was. Every scar on his body was proof of his struggle, proof of the countless times he had bled to reach the pinnacle realm. Such pain was nothing new to him. It was a constant companion, one that had followed him like a shadow through every battle and lifetime. He took a firm step forward, the sound of his boots echoing through the silent arena. This suffering would not break him. Seo's eyes blazed with unshakable determination as he gripped his sword once more, blood dripping down his palm. No matter how much it hurt, he swore he would never give up. Even if his hand burned and his veins screamed, he would rise beyond his limits. He would break through once again and reach a realm higher than ever before. Just like that, 10 more years quietly passed beneath the endless sky, and now 3 full decades had gone by since Seo's regression began. Time had carved wisdom into his face and steadiness into his heart. Through those long years, Seo grew accustomed to the constant ache that lingered in his right hand. The pain never truly left him, but it became a familiar companion, one he learned to move with rather than fight against. His swordsmanship evolved, the once imperfect techniques honed into flawless precision. The flowing grace of his sword silk technique reached perfection, and he had long since mastered the elusive shadow techniques. Yet what mattered most was not the refinement of his blade, but the secret knowledge he had uncovered. Holding an old letter sent by Kim Young-hoon, Seo studied its faded words carefully. Within its cryptic lines, he had nearly unveiled the hidden truth behind the cultivator's existence. It was said that most cultivators concealed their dwellings behind powerful formations, barriers invisible to ordinary eyes. The weaker ones built their homes within the mortal realm, blending in among common folk, But those born with great talent or heirs of renowned clans resided within vast spiritual domains, protected and nourished by sacred formations. And now, after 30 years of struggle, Seo stood on the verge of discovering that hidden world. Seo's research led him to a grim truth about the cultivator's hidden territories. Within those sacred lands, even ordinary people lived, not as equals, but as servants or slaves. They worked tirelessly to serve their masters, cleaning courtyards, carrying water, and tending to their needs. Some were treated slightly better, while others were bound by cruel fate, never allowed to leave. According to Kim Young-hoon's most recent letter, Seo finally uncovered a disturbing detail. It was one of the cultivator clans that had been secretly sending powerful assassins, those who had reached the pinnacle realm, into the royal palace. These assassins were not born cultivators, but ordinary people, handpicked for their potential. The clan had been capturing talented commoners, training them in secret, and molding them into deadly warriors. Reading the reports, Seo understood the situation more clearly. Many of the beggars and wanderers who had mysteriously vanished from the royal records were likely taken into these hidden domains. There, they were either forged into assassins or condemned to live out their days as slaves, bound forever to serve their cultivator overlords. As Seo stared into the flickering firelight, a heavy silence filled the room. The truth was cruel, but now he knew what kind of world hid behind those powerful formations. A world where strength dictated fate, and weakness meant servitude. As Seo stood deep in thought, his mind filled with the tangled web of cultivator politics, a voice suddenly echoed from behind him, breaking the silence. Someone spoke from the shadows, questioning him with a teasing tone. The unexpected voice startled Seo, making him turn sharply toward the source. His eyes widened in surprise as he recognized the familiar face. It was Kim Hyung, his longtime comrade and trusted ally. Startled yet relieved, Seo exhaled deeply. He told Kim that he had just finished reading the letters and had already burned them to keep their contents secret. Kim stepped forward, a faint smile forming as he replied that he had sent those letters a month ago, surprised they had arrived so late. But then, his tone shifted. With a serious expression, Kim explained that he hadn't come merely to exchange words this time. He had discovered something important enough to bring him there in person. Hearing this, Seo's calm expression hardened. The flickering candlelight danced across his face as he braced himself, knowing that whatever Kim had found could change everything. As Seo turned toward Kim, confusion flashing in his eyes as he asked what Kim meant. But before Seo could say more, Kim's sword began to move through the air, cutting across invisible currents of energy. He explained that he was dispelling the suspicious formations that surrounded them, removing any hidden eyes or listening spells that might be nearby. Once the air around them stilled, Kim finally spoke with a grave tone. He revealed that there were 2 major cultivator clans in the kingdom of Yangguo. Seo nodded slightly, recalling the contents of the letters he had read earlier. Kim continued. One of the clans belonged to the current emperor, while the other was tied to the previous ruler. As he spoke, the image of 2 emperors came to mind. The present one cloaked in power and the shadow of the old dynasty that refused to fade. The old emperor's bloodline, known as the Jin clan, once ruled for centuries. However, 100 years ago, the Malki clan rose in rebellion, overthrowing the Jin clan and seizing the throne. Since then, the 2 clans had been locked in a hidden war, fighting relentlessly for control of the nation. After the Malki clan seized control of Yangguo, the influence of the Jin clan began to fade. Once a dominant force that ruled for generations, their power was now only a shadow of what it had been. In a desperate attempt to regain strength, the Jin clan started recruiting ordinary people, men and women with no cultivation background, and turned them into assassins through harsh and secretive training. Seo listened quietly as Kim explained this. He already knew part of the story from the letters he had received, but Kim's expression made it clear that the true revelation was yet to come. The next part, Kim said, was what truly mattered. He then posed a question that sent a chill through the room. How could the Jin clan transform mere mortals into martial artists who stood at the pinnacle realm? How could they produce such powerful warriors in such numbers? The answer, Kim revealed, was horrifying. The Jin clan had discovered a forbidden method. They infused the bodies of their assassins with the spirits of their own families. This cruel act forcefully awakened hidden potential, pushing their talent to inhuman levels. Seo's eyes widened in disbelief as the truth sank in. He asked if the Jin clan truly slaughtered the assassins' families only to use their souls as fuel. Kim shook his head gravely. The reality was even darker. It wasn't the Jin clan who carried out the killings. It was the current emperor himself, the ruler who now sat upon the throne. It was the Malki clan, the ruling cultivators of Yangguo. Seo stared at the scene, his eyes narrowing as Kim continued explaining. For nearly 3 decades, the Malki clan had been committing unspeakable acts. In their pursuit of immortality and power, they had been turning orphans and beggars into ingredients, using human lives as raw material for alchemy. Kim's voice grew grim as he revealed the truth. The Malki clan had been collecting the blood and life force of ordinary people to forge pills capable of extending the lifespan of cultivators. These cruel experiments were carried out in secret, hidden behind the glory of the imperial court. The poor, the abandoned, the voiceless, they were chosen because their disappearance would go unnoticed. Villages lost entire groups overnight, yet no one dared question the empire. Seo clenched his fists in silent rage as the reality sank in. The powerful Malki clan, the so-called protectors of Yangguo, had built their strength upon the suffering of innocents. They weren't rulers. They were butchers wearing the robes of immortals. Kim's words struck like thunder. The truth behind the emperor's cultivators left Seo trembling in disbelief. His eyes widened, voice shaking as he muttered in horror, wondering if this was nothing less than cannibalism. Kim's calm yet grim tone confirmed it. They were consuming people. The Malki clan and the emperor's chosen cultivators had fallen so far that they now fed upon human life to fuel their strength. Seo clutched his face in despair, unable to comprehend the depth of corruption. These were not demons, nor wicked cults. They were supposed to be righteous cultivators, the ones destined to ascend to the heavens. Yet they had become worse than monsters. Overwhelmed by disgust, he could no longer contain his anger. The realization tore through his heart. The emperor's men, whom he had once served and protected, were nothing but cannibals clothed in sacred robes. Innocent people were being slaughtered under imperial orders, all for power and longevity. And the most painful truth of all, he had spent his entire life defending those very butchers. Seo's eyes trembled as he looked down at his bandaged hands. They had once fought for justice, yet now all he could see were the countless sins they had unknowingly committed. His voice cracked with regret as he wondered how many innocent lives had been wronged by these very hands. Kim stood in silence before him, his expression shadowed. He explained how, upon learning of the Malki clan's crimes, the Jin clan had reached out to him. They wanted his help to strike down the Malki clan once and for all. Seo accepted without hesitation. To him, those who devoured others for power did not deserve to live. No matter their status or title, such monsters had no right to rule. Kim's voice carried conviction as he stood before Seo, his blade gleaming under the lamplight. He spoke of gathering martial artists who shared his beliefs, warriors who could no longer turn a blind eye to the corruption that plagued their land. With firm resolve, he reached out his hand and asked Seo to join him. If the Jin clan reclaimed the throne, he said, perhaps the nation would finally begin to heal from the rot festering at its core. As Kim's words echoed through the room, Seo lowered his gaze. Memories of his past lives, of countless failures and betrayals, flickered before his eyes. He realized then why the foundation-building cultivators had once stood against them. Seo's heart trembled as years of guilt and regret weighed upon him. Every battle, every sacrifice, and every scar had led to this very moment. His voice broke, but his eyes burned with determination as he finally declared his choice. He would no longer stand by and watch. With newfound resolve, Seo agreed to join Director Kim. That night, under the dark sky lit only by the moon, Seo left the palace alongside Kim Young-hoon. They were heading toward the battlefield, ready to stand beside those brave enough to rise against the Malki clan and end their reign of terror once and for all. Seo and Director Kim traveled through the night and finally reached a grand manor on the border of Seokyeong Castle. The atmosphere there was heavy with purpose. The air itself seemed to tremble under the weight of what was to come. Within its walls, the most powerful martial artists from all across Yangguo had gathered. Warriors, masters, and sect leaders stood side by side, united by a single goal, to end the tyranny of the Malki clan. Among them were elders from the 4-star 3 demons as well as representatives from other great sects. More than 10 experts at the summit and pinnacle realms stood in attendance, each one strong enough to shift the fate of a nation. Were it not for the cultivators' overwhelming power, these martial masters alone could have easily changed the tide of any war. Yet even in this alliance, distrust lingered. Some elders eyed Seo warily, their voices sharp with suspicion. They whispered among themselves, questioning why a man who once served the emperor had been brought into their midst. To them, anyone tied to the palace was an enemy waiting to strike. Seo stood silent for a moment, sensing the hostility that lingered in the air. He understood their doubt. After all, he had once served within the very palace they despised. A faint smirk crossed his face as he exhaled slowly, realizing there was only one way to earn their trust. Then, without warning, he raised his voice and unleashed a storm of fury. The courtyard trembled with Seo's furious voice as he hurled one curse after another toward the emperor. His anger echoed through the manor, shocking everyone present. The gathered martial artists exchanged uneasy glances. None had expected such raw hatred from a man once tied to the palace. Soon, the elders could no longer bear the noise. Their ears rang from his relentless shouting, and even those who had doubted him now stepped back, waving their hands in surrender. They had seen enough. His rage was real. No spy would dare speak with such venom. Realizing he had proven his loyalty, the crowd finally began to calm. Yet Seo simply exhaled and wiped his mouth, a faint smile tugging at his lips. It almost seemed like a disappointment lingered in his tone as he murmured that he could have gone on much longer. After Seo's furious outburst, the tension within the group faded, and the warriors finally accepted him as one of their own. With their trust earned, they began their march toward the cultivators' hidden base, determined to bring it down. Under the bright sky, their journey led them deep into the misty mountains, where the enemy's stronghold was said to lie. The forest was silent, save for the steady footsteps of countless warriors moving as one. Among them stood Seo, his sharp gaze scanning the horizon, until his eyes caught sight of something familiar. A group of men in dark blue robes stood ahead, their presence commanding attention. The leader, a tall man with long crimson hair, looked over the gathering and smirked, saying that Seo might prove useful. Seo froze. His breath hitched as his eyes locked onto their uniforms. That design. He had seen it before. Memories surged back like a blade to the chest. It was the same attire worn by the assassin from before. A cold realization struck him. Those men, they were from the Jin clan. Then, Director Kim approached the Jin clan leader and told him that he had kept his promise. He arrived with several men who agreed with his cause and stood beside him. He declared that his men were ready to help destroy their enemies. The red-haired man agreed and told them to prepare for the battle ahead. Later, Director Kim walked down a quiet grassy path, followed closely by Seo. Curious, Seo asked where Director Kim was heading. Without turning back, Kim replied that they had to stop somewhere and told Seo to follow him. As they continued walking, Seo asked again how far they were going, but Kim remained silent, his steps steady and determined. Eventually, they arrived at a solemn clearing filled with rows of small dirt mounds. Kim stopped and looked at the graves before them. In a calm voice, he explained that these were the remains of people killed by the Manhwa clan cultivators. He had gathered their bodies and buried them here to give them a proper resting place. Seo stared at the countless graves in shock and asked if Kim had truly buried all these people by himself. Kim didn't answer. He simply pressed his hands together in silent prayer, paying respect to the fallen. Director Kim stood silently with his hands raised, a glowing blue-green light forming between them. His calm eyes reflected the gentle energy as he whispered the words, "Heavenly Tao Spell." He explained that the people buried here had turned into vengeful spirits, their souls consumed by rage toward the Manhwa clan. To help them find peace, he had gone to the Jin clan and learned the sacred Heavenly Tao spell, a technique meant to purify resentment and guide lost souls. As the spell shone brightly, the energy spread across the graves, releasing small, glowing lights that floated into the night sky. Director Kim's voice carried softly as he reminded Seo, "Not all cultivator spells are born from hatred. What matters is how they are used." Seo watched in silence as the glowing lights drifted upward, filling the dark forest with a calm, sacred glow. For a moment, it felt as though the restless spirits had finally found peace. Director Kim turned his gaze towards Seo, his expression calm yet firm. The soft light from the lingering spell reflected in his eyes as he spoke words of wisdom. He reminded Seo that true strength did not come from endless training or power alone. It came from holding on to one's humanity. Instead of obsessing over becoming stronger, Kim urged him to remember the importance of keeping his mortal spirit intact. For losing, that would mean losing himself entirely. Seo stood quietly, unable to respond. The weight of Kim's words sank deep into his heart. He realized that his senior wasn't just teaching him cultivation, but also the meaning of life and restraint. Meanwhile, far across the valley, the red-haired man began to chant. Power surged through the air as he clasped his hands together, forming a spell that tore open the space before him. A bright portal appeared, swirling with energy, revealing the distant fortress of the Mokli clan. As the portal opened, a powerful shockwave spread through the air, distorting the surroundings. Seo and the others shielded their faces as the once peaceful landscape twisted and reshaped itself before their eyes. In an instant, the terrain changed completely. The ground hardened, the air thickened with dust, and a heavy pressure filled the atmosphere. The stench of decay soon reached them. A foul smell of dried blood and rotting flesh drifted through the wind, hinting at the countless deaths that had taken place within the Mokli clan's domain. It was a grim reminder of the cruelty that awaited them beyond the gate. From within the fortress, alarms were raised. Guards shouted in panic as they spotted the intruders through the swirling mist. Cries echoed across the walls, announcing that enemies had arrived. The Jin clan had come. A surge of spiritual energy erupted from the fortress as a shimmering blue barrier formed, covering the entire structure like a protective dome. It pulsed with power, distorting the air around it. The red-haired man stood at the front, gazing up at the fortress with a cold, calculating expression. He muttered under his breath, acknowledging the strength of the Mokli clan's defense. Their formation was indeed impressive. Amidst the swirling dust and shifting air, Director Kim stepped forward. His posture was calm yet unshakable, and a faint pressure surrounded him as he gripped the hilt of his sword. Those standing behind him watched in confusion. Whispers spread among the group as they wondered who this mortal was and why he dared to act without their command. To them, he was just an outsider, someone unworthy of stepping ahead before their elders. However, the red-haired elder's eyes told a different story. He spoke with quiet certainty and told his disciples that the mortal who looked ordinary wasn't like any ordinary being. His strength rivaled even his own. The others turned toward him in disbelief, their faces twisting with shock. The mere thought that a mortal could stand on equal ground with an elder of such power was beyond comprehension. Yet, as they looked again at the calm figure before them, just then, Director Kim stepped forward, his expression sharp with focus as he drew in a deep breath. Blue spiritual energy began to swirl wildly around his body, forming a violent storm that crackled with power. His hands trembled slightly as he gathered the energy, compressing it into a glowing sphere of light that pulsed like a beating heart. The ground beneath him cracked under the force, and his roar echoed through the battlefield. Seo's eyes widened in disbelief. He recognized the technique instantly. It was a power that surpassed the realm of the five energies converging to the origin. With a single motion, Director Kim thrust his hand forward. The glowing sphere shot out like a falling star, and his body followed, descending from the sky with immense speed. The blue energy erupted on impact, slamming into the barrier that protected the Mokli clan's fortress. The ground shook violently. Dust exploded outward, and the shimmering defensive wall rippled under the force of the strike. Cracks began to appear in its surface. Upon seeing this, the warriors nearby froze in disbelief, their eyes wide as they struggled to process the sheer force unleashed before them. Even the red-haired elder, known for his composure, stood silently for a moment, his expression hardening as realization struck. The barrier protecting the Mokli clan's fortress began to fracture. Bright cracks of blue lightning spread across its surface before shattering completely with a deafening roar. The fortress trembled under the blast, its gates splintering apart as waves of dust and debris rolled outward like a raging tide. But from within the wreckage came a sight more horrifying than anyone expected. Out of the collapsing castle poured countless figures, pale, lifeless, and filled with unnatural rage. Their eyes glowed white, their mouths twisted in grotesque snarls as they let out blood-curdling screams. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were Jiangshi, corpse puppets bound by dark energy. Seeing the swarm rush forward, the red-haired elder's voice thundered across the battlefield. He commanded his warriors to cut through the undead and storm the fortress. With blades drawn and energy flaring, the army charged ahead, following his cry as the real battle for the Mokli clan's stronghold began. The ground split apart as the army surged forward. Blue lightning raged in the sky, tearing through the clouds as the fortress shook beneath the overwhelming clash of power. Waves of dust and energy rolled outward, and the battlefield descended into chaos. Among them, Seo also revealed himself, a master of martial arts whose strikes carried lethal precision. One of the Mockley clan commanders quickly realized the danger. These enemies weren't ordinary. They were at least at the first or second stage of the Qi refining realm. He ordered the lower-ranked disciples to retreat and call for reinforcements, knowing they could no longer stop them. From behind the front lines, Seo's sharp eyes noticed something familiar. The uniforms worn by the Jiangshi, the markings on their sashes, they all belonged to the Mockley clan. A chill crept up his spine as his memories from a previous life surfaced. He had seen that man's face before, the very same man who had killed Seo in his previous regression, and to his shock, that man was a member of the Mockley clan itself. A sudden blur crossed his vision, and unfamiliar images flickered before his eyes. His brow furrowed, confusion spreading across his face. Something about what he saw felt wrong, out of place. The thought echoed quietly within him. Why was he seeing this? He found it strange. Those glowing lines weren't just random patterns, they were meant for deliberate attacks, or so he had thought. But as one of the undead Jiangshi was struck and let out a ghastly cry, a realization dawned upon him. Could it be that these dead Jiangshi possessed their own intentions? He wondered if the strange movements of the Jiangshi came from the one controlling them. But almost immediately, he dismissed the thought. That couldn't be the case. If they truly were being controlled, then these Jiangshi should also be capable of using Gang Qi. And then, realization struck him. As the undead figures moved in unison, a faint red aura shimmered in the distance. Standing at its center was a man cloaked in calm yet sinister energy. At that moment, he understood. The one behind it all, the one controlling the Jiangshi, was that man. By observing the size and power of the formation, it became clear that the man was no ordinary cultivator. He possessed the strength of at least a one-star Qi refining cultivator. Gripping his sword tightly, Seo prepared himself for what was to come. He ran towards the cultivator and swung his sword with fierce precision, meeting the other's glowing palm head-on. The impact sent a burst of energy rippling through the battlefield, shaking the ground beneath them. Sparks danced between their strikes. The cultivator's face twisted in terror as lightning flashed around him. His body trembled and his voice broke into a desperate plea. Tears and sweat mixed on his face as he cried out, begging for mercy. Seo seized the trembling cultivator by the collar, lifting him off the ground with ease. His cold gaze pierced through the other's fear as he turned towards a vast courtyard that lay ahead, littered with countless lifeless bodies. He demanded the cultivator, "What is this?" The terrified cultivator struggled to speak, his body shaking uncontrollably. Tears streamed down his face as he struggled to speak, his voice trembling with fear. He shouted desperately, promising to reveal everything if only his life were spared. With panic in his eyes, he confessed, This is the first step for refining." His words hung heavy in the air, echoing amidst the flames and the scent of death. Seo's eyes glowed faintly, his voice low and filled with disbelief as he asked the cultivator what he meant. The first step? The frightened cultivator trembled before him, his words spilling out in fear. He confessed that the process began by extracting the veins and vital energies of mortals to create origin blood. He explained that once the origin blood was gathered, it was handed over to the higher authorities. Those in power would then mix all the collected blood in a single place, beginning what they called the second refining. The process did not end with the second refining. It was repeated again and again for the third, fourth, and even fifth stages. Through each refinement, the mixture grew purer and more potent. From the combined essence of 1,000 mortal lives and their vital energies, a crimson pill was finally created. This pill, known as the Revival Pill, was reserved for the core formation elders, used to restore their strength and extend their lives, all at the cost of countless innocent souls. Desperation twisted across the frightened cultivator's face as he tried to bargain for his life. He stammered, promising to hand over the origin blood if it would spare him. He explained quickly that the origin blood held immense energy within it, enough to strengthen anyone who used it. His voice trembled as he spoke, trying to sound convincing, though the fear in his eyes betrayed his crumbling composure. Seo finally spoke, his voice calm, yet heavy with finality. A faint, almost grateful smile crossed his face as he thanked the cultivator, saying that now he could kill them all without hesitation. The words sent a chill through the air. The terrified cultivator's face froze in disbelief, his breath catching as a single thought raced through his mind. This was the end. But just then, a spear launched toward Seo. However, Seo moved quickly and dodged the attack. As he turned back, he recognized the man who had just launched the attack toward him. It was the captain of the royal palace where he had once worked. But before he could say more, the older man before him snapped and told him to shut up. The captain's glare hardened as he pointed his spear forward at Seo and told him that he didn't know a man who would betray his own people.